that's that part. Can you let me know when it's going, Ted?
Yeah, I'm just firing up right now.
Just get to the channel.
Okay.
Here. All right.
I think it says it's going right now. Alright, so we'll blast that out on Tweety. No.
Yeah, I see it. We're good.
Twitter.
Okay, so how are you guys doing tonight?
Awesome.
Cannot complain. Cannot complain, but once we get started, I'll have a lot to complain about.
There is a lot to complain about, no question. But it's a lovely day.
Alright, so we got the whole gang back, but save Steve, but we also have special guest in tonight, Just My Stupid Opinion. So if anybody is not familiar with his channel, I would suggest going and subscribing to it. And I've left a link below for his Twitter and for his channel. So, Just My Stupid Opinion, what do you want to go by?
You could just call me Adrian.
Alright, so Adrian, for those who aren't familiar with your channel, do you want to kind of give them a rundown of who you are and what you're kind of about?
Sure. Yeah, so I started up on YouTube, I guess it's a little over a year ago now, and it was mostly just because I didn't have my own group of people to talk to when it concerning politics. A lot of my friends, even though we're in Ottawa, they just really didn't have an interest for it. So I just started off talking about a few subjects, and then I started getting a little more involved, and I started to notice the problems that we were starting to have. So I really got started with my episodes. I usually cover what's going on in the news throughout the week, and then I'll put out videos in between. Usually they're more investigative pieces into a certain subject, which I'll spend a couple weeks researching into. Last one I ended up doing, which I dropped just before the Ontario election, was just covering how a lot of PR groups were actually registered to work with. They were registered in the Ontario service pool, and some of them in a couple of these companies actually were actively trying to get voters. They were going out and trying to canvass voters. So it seemed to me like a big conflict of interest, especially because a lot of them could be linked directly back to Justin Trudeau's Canada 2020 think tank. So mostly my channel is just covering anything that has to do with Canadian politics, and sometimes I'll focus a little bit on American or geopolitics, but not my strong suit. So, and the whole idea behind calling myself Just My Stupid Opinion was I wanted to let people know what they were coming for. They weren't coming for any super intellectual content, but on top of that, it was sort of my own defense. Anytime I've put out a video that a lot of people have been critical, most of the time they end up just posting in my comment section, "This is just your stupid opinion." So it plays out exactly the way I want it to.
Well, I find your material extremely well researched, so yeah, I don't think that's you're doing yourself a disservice.
Oh well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I agree completely. I thoroughly enjoy your
Ted,
channel.
You'll be interested to know that Adrian was on Hard News Network the other night.
HB's really, I often listen to most of his stuff, but he's sort of he's become very I don't know, paranoid about what YouTube might do to him. So everything, you have to go to the Hard News Network or BitChute or something to get to see it other than live, right?
Yeah, I've noticed that too, and I can't really blame him too much. I've noticed that he's had YouTube come down hard on him recently. He's had his content restriction, his live stream was taken off, so I don't blame him for being so difficult on that. That story we were covering...
No, I'm not blaming him, just he must be on, like, he must have a reason for doing so, absolutely.
Yeah, it was kind of cool being on his channel.
When would that have been? Recently?
Within the last week, yeah. I think it was probably 4 or 5 days ago.
Hard Bastard's problems make it slightly different, or slightly more difficult for me to hear what he says, right? I mean, he does a lot of hours, but I missed that one. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. And even so, it would have been like right at smack in the middle of it. I think it was hour 3 or 4 that we finally went live with them. And that story we were just covering is I got a guy that I work with a lot, Bold Like a Leopard, who covers, he's American, he covers a lot of his news. And for him, what the problem was is that he noticed a while ago that there's a guy called John Mattis, he's been one guy that's been pushing much of the Russiagate incidents going on in the States, but he was claiming that a Bernie Sanders Facebook group was hacked by the Russians, and there was a lot of anti-Hillary propaganda that was being pushed through it. Only problem is that he wasn't an administrator of the group, even though he claimed to be an administrator when he first launched the story. Yeah, he's been on a few different mainstream media outlets. I know he was on MSNBC Rachel Maddow's show. And a lot of the other administrators in the group were saying that he's full of crap. On top of this, all this was taking place after Bernie Sanders dropped out of the primaries. So Bold's been the one mostly chasing that story, and I've been helping him with that. But a month ago, I did an undercover call with him to John Mattis, and we ended up comparing a lot of his information to what he's put out in the past to what he told me directly. So we've been trying to get that story as much attention as possible.
Wow.
Wow.
See, that's something of a paradox that the left and right sort of politics have a problem with, is that the Russiagate thing, like, yeah, the Bernie bros, if you will, they were against Hillary as well, right? So it's hard for that. The whole thing's completely crumbled now. There is no Russia nonsense coming out of CNN or anything anymore. I'm sure sometimes they do, but it's kind of crumbled.
Absolutely.
And part of the problem is that, you were saying, oh, some of the Bernie people seem to be involved with Russia. Yeah.
I mean, the whole Bernie or Bust group was around long before Bernie Sanders dropped out of the primaries, and I know a lot of people didn't like Hillary Clinton, so it seemed more likely that after she lost, a lot of them were just pushing their anti-Hillary articles that ever they could find. So that was more likely what it was seeing to me. And I was a guy that when I first heard about the Russia narrative, I thought it was a real possibility. I paid close attention. I think episode 2 or 3 of my podcast, I ended up doing, I took it about an hour and a half, where I was looking into all the information that I had available. But since then, I've just seen one thing after another come tumbling down. One of the big ones was when they ended up hitting Paul Manafort with they ended up giving him, I think it was tax evasion of all things, so they gave him the Al Capone treatment. That to me was showing that there wasn't much there. And then there was the Project Veritas videos came out where they were talking to CNN, and they were just...
That's why I'm not on Twitter, actually, the Project Veritas videos. I get the YouTube link with the hashtag, and I bombed the internet. I don't know when the hell that was, but 2-3 weeks before the election of Trump. I forget when that was. And that's led to all my problems on Twitter, because those guys exposed so many things that were going on, and it seemed it was verboten even, heaven forbid some little guy from Ontario would drop a bunch of memes and stuff,
Well, be glad you're not in the over in Europe right now, because as Seamus and I were talking a minute ago, it looks like it's going to be illegal now to put anything of the sort out. The whole thing is going into hell in a handbasket.
I think that's going to extend outside of Europe. That's the problem I see, but I guess that'll be.
I'm waiting for it to come here.
It's about like copyright things. Like I haven't got the full story on that one personally. Like how it works, where EU has decided that you can't link to something else. Like one of the things that I don't know, that people do is like, I made a video and here's the information where I got my information, or this is the information, this is where I got my information from. It's a series of links, and they're kind of trying to say you can't link to anything. Then you can't prove what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right.
So you just become a dummy on a camera.
I think that's the point, and
that's what they're trying to do.
And I think it extends globally, right? Because the Facebook nonsense, they've been using the European stuff on Facebook around the world. They exercise their jurisdiction on any social media platform because they say, well, it comes in Europe, right? Like your Twitter feed, right?
I mean, it's getting closer to the communist Chinese style now. I mean, it's getting, yeah, everything. The EU, oh God, those people. What is that?
Now I heard there's a rule out there that the police are not allowed to chase a criminal on a moped. Is that right? Like, and
Right.
apparently that's true. That's what I heard. The police are not allowed to chase somebody on a moped. So all of a sudden, moped crimes have raised. So people are like,
Yeah, it wouldn't be not allowed. It would just be like, why bother? Sort of.
Oh,
right?
is this over in the
Yeah.
UK? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I heard it was an actual rule because the people getting away on mopeds were getting hurt in the
Yes,
chase.
I've heard. Getting
what a
hurt. That's
terrible
what.
thing.
That's what it is.
Criminals get hurt.
Yeah, so the police are chasing down the guy on the moped who just like mugged an old lady or did whatever he did, and the moped flips over and the criminal gets hurt, and so of course we can't have that. So now this is what I heard, and I don't know. I'm just wondering if anyone else has heard it. That apparently they're not allowed to chase criminals on mopeds, so all of a sudden moped crime is like ridiculous.
You could practically run down a moped at that point. You wouldn't even
Well,
need to be in a car to catch them. I mean,
Well,
a
if
little
you don't expect it,
exaggeration.
right? You just,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what I heard.
You're not
and I thought,
allowed. I don't know. It's a social justice thing. Who is doing moped crime?
Well,
all
man.
people go by and grab
with those
hurt,
knives
right?
too. They banned those, or they're trying to get rid of those knives. What do they call them? They have some zombie knives.
Zombie knives?
Yeah,
Butter
butter
knives?
knives. No, these things
Oh.
aren't butter knives. Yeah, because
Yeah, zombie knives are
Wow.
like 2 feet
yeah,
long
because
or
they use the
something.
zombie knives in combination with the mopeds to just drive up and stab people and take their stuff. It's just a really common crime. That's why stabbings and murders with knives are out of control in the UK. That's because they don't have licenses for their knives. Everybody's got to get a license.
You got a
Well,
license?
With the way that the police are acting in the UK, it just brings me back to a flashback I saw on Family Guy one time, where it's got one person runs up to the police, is like, "Help! This person just mugged me," and the officer's like, "Don't worry, I've got a rubber truncheon, a soft cap, and a notepad." That's almost the point it's at right now in the UK. They're not doing anything to solve their crimes. In fact, sometimes they're actively covering them up. There was that bombshell article that was released about their grooming gangs out there, where the police were actually even sometimes asking the victims not to go public with their
Or
experience.
threatening to charge the father,
Oh, years
the
now.
father who came to rescue his daughter, and then they wanted to charge him with trespass.
yeah,
Well, yeah, because he was. Yeah. Obviously, I'm assuming he wasn't very nice to the rapist. I don't know. He is,
Well,
but I mean,
no, he didn't. He didn't do
Clown
anything.
world.
He didn't do anything. He just showed up. He came to this, flat above some business, and his daughter was there. She called the police. She called him. She was standing there naked with all these guys, and he's like, I'm taking her
Yeah.
home, and the cops are like, okay, you're trespassing. You shouldn't be here
Yeah.
because he wanted them charged.
oh yeah.
Yep.
So then they see private property rules being enforced. I mean, it's like everything's upside down.
Well, they're all involved.
Yes.
That's the problem. Like this judge who had Tommy Robinson arrested.
Not the cops themselves, right? So
No, not necessarily the cops themselves, but certainly the higher ups.
No,
And-
the cops are too. I don't know if you guys caught that, and there was 2 incidents of it.
Well-
I was watching one of the protests one day, and what's his name? I forget his name. Oh, Hijab. Do you guys know this guy, Hijab?
Yes,
Yeah,
the
the really
Asian
big, the
guy.
Asian guy, the really big MMA fighter. He's he's
Oh,
like 7 foot tall. He and another guy from Speaker's Corner showed up at the what was that? The Tommy. Yes, it was. It was before Tommy got thrown in jail. It was he was showed up at the Tommy free speech event and said that they were invited. And they're like, no, you weren't invited, but we'll see if we can see about something. And then a fight started, but it was them that started the fight, number one. And number two, the only person that got hit, and I took the clip and I got it in slow mo. I haven't put it out yet, where Hijab punches a cop, like full on punches him. And then a little while later, they're like, oh, they take them away. And then they're like, are you guys okay? Everything. And I'm like, what the fuck, man? He just like full on punched a cop, like really hard. And there was a second incident I saw of that where they let the guy go just a little while ago. They did it off charges.
See, it's all at the top. The HR. Can you imagine the HR department meetings that the fucking cops are going through? Like, I don't even want to. Who could believe what they're now? When, like, how do they get to what? I don't know.
oh yes.
People at the top have to make sure that their underlings do what they say. And I just don't know how they get there. But I mean, a lot of them, I mean, maybe they're hired because they are easily programmable. I don't know.
Well, why are the police going along with it? That's my question. The ground level, grassroots policemen who are allowing this to happen.
And
Maybe they're only hiring people who are easily, like, the HR meetings are good for you, and throw away common sense.
well, and that was actually my next question as well, because you know what, that used to be my thinking, and then I just said that and got the flashback of Faith Goldie, right, at the border with the guys in the SWAT gear, and she's being attacked with some old guy. Like, are you kidding me? Come on. They're standing less than 20 feet away, and they're letting this happen. And I, honest to God, was raised to have the utmost respect for police, but when I see that, when I lived in Vancouver, I was threatened by a big, huge Muslim guy, and like, I'm little, but I was threatened he was going to kill me, told me he was going to chop my head off, and I called the police, and they told me I was racist. So,
Oh, Jesus Christ.
See the HR department meetings, right? You have to destroy their common sense.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a really
So,
weird
anyone in
thing.
the public service, like, they would never hire me. I mean,
No,
really.
me neither. Or they would fire me right away.
Yeah, yes, that I understand.
Yeah.
This one is not playing along.
I first noticed it at my old job, because my old job, when I first got there, I guess it's probably been about 5 years ago. I don't work there anymore, but it was about 5 years ago I started there, and everyone there loved joking. And, the jokes could be pretty vulgar at times, but nobody took them to heart. It was always a good time. And then the HR department started to step in more and more and more. And before we realized it, the most simplest jokes were seen as, like, you were getting hauled into the manager's office getting a talking to because of a joke you made. And sometimes this was a joke where the other person, they didn't complain or anything. They took it quite fine. But just the whole fact that the idea that you even made the joke, even if you were in a room with just us two where nobody else heard, but maybe the supervisor heard or someone in passing, it was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, the HR department and the gender studies department at the university are the same.
It's amazing. I always thought gender studies was something you did in between classes at university.
Yeah, it was like you got it as a
Like it wasn't
joke credit, right? Yeah, but no, but I mean the leftists once upon a time were against the corporations, but I'm sorry, the HR department of the corporations are just the same as the fucking gender studies thing at the university. So I mean, what is the left any longer?
The left sold out a long time ago. I found when I started up, I still started my talk like on YouTube. I did consider myself more of a liberal at the time, but now I just think that a lot of the
consider myself a liberal
presupposition.
now, but I mean,
I know.
what happened to them?
I
I
feel
don't
the
know,
same
man.
way. I used to consider myself a liberal as well. Absolutely. But now I don't know what the hell to consider myself. I'm like, I mean, you don't go in a straight line. You kind of, because I don't certainly agree with everything.
The world changed around you with what has happened, right? So, I mean, Seamus has been a dirty conservative his whole life, but I used to be liberal. I don't know what the hell that
Oh,
means.
I'm not. I'm not anymore.
Because progressive, not liberal. Well, I'm not. I understand.
I don't believe in
too,
any
right?
of this bollocks.
The two sides of the Cyclops. Yeah.
This is kind of a good segue into what we're going to be hopefully talking about tonight, which is the Bank of Canada. So, in my, you're talking about freedom of speech and liberal and all these things that are coming upon us. They're not new things. That's the thing, and it's not necessarily, in my belief, so the last month and a half I've taken off. I've really gone off and looked into some other things, and I'm not going to get into them tonight other than the Bank of Canada, but which plays a critical role, the financing of all this, which I don't think any of us understand. This is just a gigantic scam. The history that we learn, and this is my opinion, but I have a lot of evidence to back it up. The history that we learn, the suppression of freedom of speech, the banking, all of it. It's been, and people put names on it like communist or this kind of thing or Luciferian. I think, there's something much, much bigger at play. Elitist, etc. What's your guys' view?
It definitely comes from the very, very top, and everyone is all aligned. I mean, you're constantly seeing the same people who the general population consider to be the elite, right? People who don't know anything consider Justin Trudeau and the Queen and all these people, Mark Zuckerberg and all these other people to be the elite because they don't know anything else. But you always see those folks taking pictures all together, right? Jihad Justin and Hillary Clinton and Angela Merkel and Zuckerberg, they all hang around together. And the only countries who seem to be labeled as really bad, like Russia and whatnot, are the ones who don't really fit into that group and don't follow that. From what I can see, and I don't know, but that's what I think.
Well, I was going to say the ultimate conclusion for these people is like the Soviet Union across the world. So that is why that Russia, the ultimate enemy in the media, because they used to have utopia, Soviet Union, and they broke away and they're doing their own thing. So I don't know. I think it's related.
They found a way in order to actually sort of keep the people enslaved and how to keep people under control, and it happens to be through our wallets, because a lot of people, when they happen to go broke, when they happen to lose everything, they'll become much more compliant with the state. And I think that the people who are really controlling the money have found their way of doing this. They started it maybe 100, 150 years ago. And what actually is scary, is I've done more research into the Bank of Canada and overall the financial system, is I feel that they're a lot closer to completing it than they are at beginning it. I think that the whole world is actually a lot closer to being underneath financial control than we like to admit.
Yep.
Agreed.
Is that why there's such an awakening? Because
Yes,
uh, did anybody know about any of this stuff? I mean, 5 years
yes,
ago, I
they
don't know.
did. They
Some
did,
people
and you
did.
can you can find them on YouTube, but they're the ones that are locked down. Those are the videos that you're going to
Yeah.
get the warnings right away saying, "Oh, are you sure you want to watch this? Click yes." Because they don't want people to know, and I think that plays a role into this not being able to link proofs and things like that now, because they don't want people to discover the truth.
Well, I think that the rise of the internet may have screwed them over with that. I mean, there's still a lot of people that are asleep, but as we can tell, that a lot more people are starting to realize the problems that are coming about, and we can owe it a lot to having YouTube, having access to the internet, and we can all research and get our message out these days. And even if they tend to censor these platforms, I don't think it'll be able to stop us, because a lot of people will just go back to using their own websites. I mean, before we had this more centralized internet, whether it happens to be YouTube or Google, we were all just going right directly to the website. So if it becomes that bad, I think that we'll just go back to that.
You don't think that uh, ICANN and the DNS is going to bury websites? They already have in the past, right?
It's possible, but I think it's the best option because it's more of a decentralized information system. If we're going directly to the websites themselves, that'd be very hard. I mean, it is possible if we're talking about the internet service providers, if they're getting more involved with this, then it would actually be a lot more difficult. But I think there's still hope as it stands that we can get the information out that people need to know.
Higher up,
And as long
higher up, the ICANN, which Obama gave away, freedom of speech, right? That was it's much higher than the ISP. ICANN controls all the. So if you enter google.com, it comes up with the DNS number, and if the DNS number doesn't match the website, you get a 404, right? So if they they have delisted people before. Who's that? Mike Adams. They did that to him. Apparently they did it to Jones, but definitely Mike Adams and big people. This was my argument with Ted a long time ago. If they delist smaller people, you're never going to know, right? Bigger people, who was it? Was it Jordan that got delisted too? Over on Google.
They've done that, but
Okay, your gazebo blows.
they did censor it.
Your
Sorry, what?
gazebo blows. I'm going to have to drive out there and give you some internet.
Oh, poor network connection. I'm getting that coming up. Even though I got 3/4.
They just don't like you, Ted. They don't like you.
I could jump out and come back. Am I still a robot or what?
I don't know. I don't know. So, okay, what have you discovered in your studies, Adrian?
Well, I started to, I guess I ended up starting off actually, once I started looking into the financial system and realizing when everyone went off the gold standard, I realized it was roughly around the time of, some were getting off it about World War I, but most of them were starting to go back on after the war ended because they needed more income in order to fund the war effort. But as I started looking into it, it was around the Great Depression that ended up where people pretty much got off the gold standard with everything that was going on. So when I started looking into it more and looking into the Great Depression, I started to notice that there was a lot of people, a lot of the people who were really, I guess you could say the biggest players in the stock market, they were starting to get out just before the stock market crashed. So what I think ended up happening with that was that they ended up getting out, which ended up triggering the stock market, but the stock market to crash. What's that?
Imagine my shock.
But they started getting out right around that time, and then then the Great Depression hit, and then they got away with their money, no problems, but the average person ended up losing everything. So I think around this time, it was around this time we started to move to fiat currency. And as I looked into the banking system as it works, it really is like I will parallel what you said there, Seamus, is that it is a con because we are doing right now is we are building up our debt more and more and more, and we're borrowing from these central banks, but the international centralized bank, whether that happens to be the International Monetary Fund, which are all owned by pretty much the same people. The biggest players these days in the stock market are all owned by the same people. So when I was looking into this, it really is a con because as you start realizing that when you start borrowing from these international banks, the debt suddenly skyrockets. I ended up coming across it was an analysis by the Fraser Institute where they were going along our federal government debt between all of the prime ministers we've ever had. And it was around 1974, just as Pierre Elliott Trudeau, he stopped taking money from the Bank of Canada, which could be loaned out interest free. That's when we started to see a skyrocket in our debt. Literally from 1974.
Yes, at that point, because he changed over to the Bank of International Settlements, which was the beginning of the end for us financially. Sorry, anyway, continue. I'll bring up a chart of that.
And then they started playing with this idea of fractional reserve banking. And fractional reserve banking, which means that they can loan out a bunch of money as long as they keep a certain amount of it inside of their reserves. However, this allows them to essentially create money out of thin air. They loan it out. The people the people have to pay it back. But then, according to their bank records, they still have the full amount inside of their bank. So if they have $100 million, they have to keep 10% back. So they keep $10 million in their vaults, loan out the other $90 million. Well, then, by their bank records, they still have the $100 million sitting in their vault, but they've loaned out that other $90 million, which essentially has just created a $90 million out of thin air like that. And since we have this idea now where most of our banking is done online, it's not even being done with actual hard cash anymore. It's just numbers in a system. It allows them to get away with it, allows them to scam the people. So we're seeing a high rate of inflation due to this. The value of our dollar is dropping, and it is literally putting everybody into the poorhouse. Despite this, our government is constantly, instead of borrowing from the Bank of Canada, which will give out the loans interest-free, they're going to these international banks, which then require them to pay it back at high interest. As I've looked into it, I noticed that most of our debt has actually come on because of the borrowing from these banks, and we're paying off. It's just the interest rates that are building it up. I think I saw about 14% of our tax dollars are going to service the debt right now, and approximately 70 to 75% of our debt is strictly due to interest payments.
That's all.
Sooner or later, it's all got to come crumbling down.
It doesn't even cover interest. That's the thing. I mean, it's a misnomer. Service payments to pay the interest is what it is. It's just paying interest, but it doesn't even fully cover. Well, it's like your minimum monthly balance on your credit card. And that's all we pay, and that is 10 to 12 cents of every tax dollar is going towards that, and it amounts to over $1.1 trillion. That's our debt times 2 that we've been scammed out of.
Okay, now what I wonder is what army do these bankers have? All of them?
Sorry?
What army do these bankers have?
Our army
all
in terms of what?
Let's say we're not paying it. What happens?
Well, then they come in and seize control of the country, which they have done before. They've done this before. Well, look at New Zealand. Sorry? They just come in. It's a fiscal obligation. Do I agree with you? Yeah. No, I think that we should all tell them to go and fuck themselves. Hungary did it, and of course they're an enemy, right? Hungary did it. Russia did it.
Yeah.
How many attempts on Putin's life since he told them to go and fuck themselves? Iceland did it. It's possible to do it, and if you look historically, somebody else did it too, which is we really probably shouldn't touch on quite yet. But sorry,
Jackson.
no, oh, with Jackson, yes. So in America, the Federal Reserve, but Canada is one of the funny countries. It doesn't actually. We do actually have a nationalized bank. I had to dig far, and it is true. It is true. We do have a nationalized bank, but we borrow the money from private banks in order. It's not.
I was gonna say, is that some sort of quirk where in the system where we can actually borrow from the Bank of Canada at interest free? I mean, there must be something that it's written in their existence as the Bank of Canada that
From what I could tell,
sorry.
From what I can tell, they can set their own interest rates. So when we're talking about lending to the federal and provincial governments, they have a certain amount that they can lend to. I think for the federal, they can lend up to 1/3 of our GDP, and when it's the provinces, it's 1/4 of the GDP. But they can set their own interest rates, which means they can loan it out completely interest free if they want.
I see.
And but the thing about when we're about borrowing from these international banks is it does seem to be unconstitutional, because Section 91 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is the power of the Parliament. And it says, when we look down, it goes through a few different subsections. Subsection 14 and 15. Subsection 14 is currency and coinage, and subsection 15 is banking, incorporation of banking, and the issue of paper money. So it should be under the control of our government. And there was actually a quote that I found that was by William Lionel Mackenzie King. And he says, once a nation parts with the control of its currency and credit, it matters not who makes the nation's laws. Usury, once in control, will wreck any nation. And the more we see, and the more I've sort of paid attention to this, the more I'm starting to see this these days. I mean, our debt, it really is, just keeps going up and up. We never seem to be able to ever get a handle on it. Even when it was at a more manageable rate, we could never get a handle on it. And over the last couple years, we've almost doubled it, I think. I think when Harper finally left office, it was around $500 billion. But now we're up to $1 trillion just in 3 years under the Trudeau government of spending. Probably has something to do with his opening the Canada Infrastructure Bank. I think that's also probably playing a part into it as well.
That's just another scheme to defraud Canadian people. So we live literally in debt slavery, and we've been lulled into this for so long, generations now, to believe this. Once upon a time, Canada did have, first of all, a proper bank that wasn't issuing money like it's water, because that's their solution now. They just keep printing more and more money. I'm going to drop a little clip video that I put together with Carney, where he's talking about, I quite like Bernier. Bernier really knows what's going on, and look at where he's at. He's getting the shaft now, right? And he's been talking about it for years, and he's been saying, "Listen, you guys, what's going on here? We don't need to be." The 2% built-in inflation. So our dollar has deflated so badly, inflated so badly. Think the cost of living, that is why everything is just out of control. Out of control.
Well, it's these free trade agreements too, right? Where, we used to make stuff.
This is just... This is just the Bank of Canada printing money.
How that works.
This is just the Bank of Canada. Here, I'll bring up a chart from the Bank of Canada and how much money they've been printing. It goes out of control, and this is why things are so expensive now in relation, and it does not keep up with pay raises, and they know that, and they're in fully.
And what's worse is the price of a home relative.
Yes. Let's look at that.
Individual homeowners everywhere. I'm almost a dinosaur on my.
There's a house prices versus wages. and you can see how badly that's out of control. People are getting maybe 20%.
It's all these things all together. It's all these things all together. The screwing with the money, making home prices, not relative to wages. It all adds up to, like, making it more difficult for.
Well, the thing is they want everybody on benefits and they want everybody renting, because then they're in control. And that's the thing. And I'll tell you, just personal experience, what did I do? In December of 2017, I refinanced my mortgage. And I was approved for a certain amount. I didn't need that much, but I refinanced my mortgage. I was off and running, no big deal. And I sold my house in February and re-qualified for a port of a mortgage. I had the exact same income. I've had the same job for the last 6 years, same income, same qualifications. And 4 months later, I qualified for $50,000 less because of whatever changes they made when January came through.
What's the first plank of the? I don't think it's just communism, but what's the first plank of the Communist Manifesto? No private property. And in Canada, my grandmother was absolutely livid about this with Trudeau. There is no property rights in this country. So you may have a title to a piece of land, but that doesn't mean shit.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I'll tell you why. My dog got out the other day. One of my dogs, who's huge, and busted out through my fence and was running around and being an idiot. And I got some guy from the city came to my house. And I said, get off my fucking property. And he said, I don't have to. And I was like, what the hell? No, he doesn't have to get off my property.
What? No, but if he buys a coffee, he can stay, right?
I would fucking hope so. I'm not selling my coffee. But you know what? It's my property. It's my dog. Yeah, she got out. I fixed the fence. It's no big deal. But if I tell you to get off my property, I bought the property. You should have to go, but you don't.
Yes, he does.
No, not by law. Otherwise, he wouldn't.
Yeah, he does have to leave. This dummy doesn't think he doesn't. What was he doing on your property? I don't understand.
Talking to me about my dog being out.
Oh. Yeah.
Right? Because he represents the city. He can come to my house and get
after my dog got out. And now you have to bitch at me? Yeah, great.
Yeah. But you're right, Seamus. Those property rights are nothing. They absolutely mean nothing.
No, they don't, Ted. They do. Legally, they don't go to any lawyer.
Whose army?
It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it?
Guess who?
When they come and take your land. And they do. Okay. Just from personal experience. From personal experience.
Really?
From personal experience, and you know what I'm talking about. The government here in Alberta attempted to seize land of ours. And they have. We hired very good lawyers, and there's 3 people in this province that are bureaucrats that decide because they pass laws. And other provinces similarly have this, where they can say nature reserve or we're expropriating it for, even without reason. Just to take your land, they don't even have to pay you. They don't have to pay you. You may not believe that, but that is the truth. Well, go and ask any lawyer, constitutional lawyer, because it's not in our Bill of Rights. There's no property rights.
Good luck. I wish them luck. Actually, I don't.
No, and you know what? I'll tell you, when I bought my property out of town, initially I wanted a farm. And then I, became aware of the situation and realized that all the way through history, whenever the government seizes everything, they start with the farms. They get rid of the farmers like they're doing in Africa right now. And the people starve because regular people don't know how to grow shit.
Well,
And so I deliberately bought acreage that's not considered a farm. And I'm not going to list it as a farm, and it's not going to be a farm for that exact reason.
I know, but isn't that, like, it's so crazy that, like, you have to buy a place that could grow things, and, if I start growing things, they'll take it from me. I mean,
No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it
Well-
is. It could be residential land. It can be agricultural land. It doesn't matter. They can
That's
seize
right.
it.
Well,
I hope no, but I want them to, like, go full forward so that there's a pushback.
Well, I just found this from the University of Alberta, Alberta Land Institute. It's a guide to property rights in Alberta. And in the first line, it says, Canadians are sometimes surprised to learn that their rights to property is not afforded the same constitutional protection that exists in other countries, such as Australia, India, and the United States. It's not exactly accurate to say that property enjoys no constitutional protection. But from this, we can pretty much infer that you don't have the same rights quite as we have in America, or those where maybe if you have an individual come on your property, you could tell them to get off, and then you could charge them if they didn't. But when we're talking about government institutions, I don't think you have the same
You're
protection.
bang on.
Exactly.
You're bang on.
This is mostly about putting highways,
Wrong.
roads through
Wrong.
your farm. Not wrong. This is the only way that it.
No,
is,
they've been
so
writing.
Yes, the government be like, you're done, and then good luck with
They've
that.
been
They won't
they've
be
been
able to-
writing stuff about the environmental boards to
Yep.
seize land for nature conservancies. That's what they like to call them.
Speaking of
Sorry?
the HR Speaking of the HR department, when you can't have a home there because it's too close to the river.
Yeah, they just come in and do some.
I'm not going to sort my own land out. I can't possibly sort my own land out by myself. Yeah, I need your help.
Well, they just take it.
Yeah, they could, but does it happen?
Has it happened yet? Well, yes, it has actually.
Wrong
But
opinion.
sorry.
If there isn't a highway involved, it doesn't happen.
There was no
The thing
highway
is that
involved on our
They
land,
won't
Ted.
make 6 things.
There was no highway anywhere near our land. You know where that is.
Yeah, well, that was some weird trade-off.
Yeah, well, I can't get into more specifics than that because it's private. But
That's not.
and it's only because certain individuals pulled some very big strings. Otherwise, we would have been fucked royally. We had no option. But they went and met with certain people, and then it disappeared. That part of it. So, does it happen? Yes.
They tried. Well, they
What are you going to do
failed,
about it?
right?
What are you going to do?
You won. No, but you won, didn't you?
No. That was coattails, basically.
The thing is that they use those tiny little laws to blackmail you in a time when you have the wrong opinion. Right? I mean, that's just what they do. Tommy Robinson's brother-in-law made a mistake on a mortgage application, and so they put him in actual prison for mortgage fraud. Like, that's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
the UK is.
Yeah,
More
but
corruption than we
this
are.
is where we come from. Our laws, that's where they come from.
I know.
And they're all part of the same agenda. So when you get on the wrong side of that, that's why you can't find Seamus's video with the hermaphroditic frogs on YouTube. But if you want to know how to join ISIS or chop somebody's fucking head off, you can find videos on YouTube. It's not a problem.
But I mean, a lot of this is a Streisand effect, right? Where when the government does something shitty like that, it just awakens more people. Like, just bring it on, do more shitty stuff.
Well,
I don't know.
we've been
I
paying
don't-
$1.1 trillion dollars in to
Yeah.
private people. So people need to literally think about that. Minutes, hours of your day are slaving for other people every workday.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is just unbelievable.
More and more people. We're going over the other side of the cliff. I don't know if you want to say, or I would say actually, the other side of the parabola, or whatever. We're not the only ones who understand that something's wrong. You know.
The only thing is, though, when we're looking at history, it seems to me that a lot of people wait too long before willing to take action. I mean, when we look at what happened in the Soviet Union, a lot of people were willing to allow the government to gain that control and then keep that control for a lot longer before they started doing something, before there was any insurrections or rebellion from the inside. I mean, we had they seized enough farmers' property in Ukraine in order to lead to a famine. But still, people, even in that case, a lot of people didn't even seem to act in those moments. So that's my only concern, is that we don't seem to have a lot of people that are willing to do anything about it. And on top of that, I saw something that wasn't, I don't remember how long ago. It was pretty recent, within the last month or two. But it was talking about how a lot of Canadians still trust both the government and the mainstream media. So that alone is a pretty damaging thing, because there's a lot of evidence out there to support where they've lied, where the government hasn't done what's good for the people, yet still people have a lot of trust in their government. It's just we don't have that built-in system quite like the Americans, where you have that distrust for government and it's more about self-sufficiency. It's just a lot of people still think that the government's the right way to go. I mean, ever since the election happened in Ontario, had a couple conversation with some friends who ended up voting NDP, and a lot of them weren't even aware that what a sanctuary province would mean for the people. They voted for the NDP, and then literally you ask, what about the sanctuary province that they wanted in Ontario? And they would ask you, like, what does that mean? I mean, that's pretty concerning when a lot of people don't even realize something like that and what the outcomes would be. There's a lot of history to it.
Sanctuary sounds nice, and they like it. Is that what you mean?
They just mean they didn't even know what it mean, like what the idea of a sanctuary province was.
Sounds lovely.
There's all of this stuff, all these fluff buzzwords, sustainable living. That sounds great. I mean, they've written a whole new lexicon, and people. You remember when we were digging really deep into what was that we were digging into, Ted? All the different related stuff to do with 2020. Going further back, and
but they use the same buzzwords, all of them. Whoever we have bumped into.
Well, and then it got to a point where the web pages were written in that garbage. You couldn't even understand what the fuck they were saying. I mean, it was just gobbledygook.
Well, it was just nonsense. Yeah, it was English. Like, they use English words, but it wasn't English as far as I understand. I mean, what the fuck? Our conversation now is going to be like high English in the future. Where those weird people in the country still speak English. We're going to go with fucking, I don't know. Well, that's another tangent entirely. The structure of language. Send the kids to French school.
So all these things, in my opinion. The press, the suppression of freedom of speech, the slow creeping control, the seizure of land, the no property rights, the absolute extortion banking-wise. This has, first of all, been going on for a long time, and second of all, like a long time. And second of all, it has an end goal, a common purpose.
A lot of heads of the Hydra, right? And they just want Soviet Union, don't they?
Yeah,
I would say so. It seems to be that way, although everyone seems to think that sort of future would lead to a Star Trek type of utopian future where everybody has a good standard of life, everyone has enough food, but it can never work that way because I think history has proven before that there's always going to be winners and losers. There's always going to be some that have more and some that have less. And even you could see it in the Soviet Union. I mean, Stalin and the rest of his other predecessors, they always had enough to eat. They always had a good shelter over their head.
Everyone, right? Yeah.
His
Animal.
DACA. Yeah. And you know, but like Soviet Union, you never hear about that stuff hardly. We learned about a little bit in high school, but we all evil was always like, placed off in different areas, right? Whereas Mao, Pol Pot, and Stalin, Marxist garbage, they killed hundreds of millions of people. Hundreds. Intentionally. Starving people off their land, throwing them in the gulags. I mean, it was atrocious.
I think for me too, one of the most when I ended up reading the Gulag Archipelago, one of the things, it was actually in some of the first pages of the book. One thing that shocked me was this story about it was a group of Russians who were so starved that one time they found some prehistoric lizards that were frozen in their ice, and they ended up smashing them out, cooking them over the fire, and eating them simply because they were not having enough food and they were so hungry. That this is the point that they got to. It was like, who knows how long those animals had been dead and frozen in that ice, like thousands, if not millions of years. But they were willing to eat it just to have something. And I've gone a day, maybe 2 days without food before, and I would do anything to eat at that point, you know. I don't usually try and go that long, but once or twice just to sort of see what it was like, you know, kind of go on a bit of a fast. I've tried it, and it's just one of the most awful things ever. Now, the thought that you could actually live every single day without knowing where your next meal comes from is just an awful idea.
And your government's going to do it. They resorted to cannibalism there. There are many documented cases from in the Russian archives itself of people eating their children, all kinds of bullshit, because their food was taken from them in the grain seizures and
They had like a Roman style fucking food chain thing going on, or food chains on the right, you know. They had a system going on and they broke it.
No, they just come in and seize all of the grain to sell for export. So they would not feed their own people, plus it was a way to control their citizens, specifically in Ukraine.
But but if you're part of, like, if you're on the outer edge of the food system, and then they break the food system, and you have the central thingy, which is not particularly productive, is in charge, people starve. So do we want to go down this road? I think there's ways that we can avert this, but we have to look back into our past to some extent and become appraised. Canadians need to become appraised of the banking system here. I mean, who is it, the lawyer who represented Comer to the Supreme Court? That case dragged on from 2012 till this year, I think it was. Last year. And you never heard peep about it. Never. There's a great video by him online about taking the Bank of Canada to court.
Yeah, it was May. I think it was somewhere around May of 2017 is when the case was finally thrown out by the Supreme Court, which to me was actually pretty suspicious. I know the Supreme Court is supposed to have its own sort of independent control, but the fact that they were winning so many court cases and then they were the Supreme Court was unwilling to hear the case to me was actually pretty suspicious. It made me wonder if they were having outside influences in order not to do it. If it had gone all the way to the Supreme Court and they had won, then we more or less would have had to revert back to pre-1974 banking, which would mean we'd go back to getting lending from the Bank of Canada rather than the International Monetary Fund or any of these other international banks that are, again, all owned by pretty much all of the same people.
Yes. I mean, the Bank of International Settlements, I mean, it shouldn't even be in existence. That was built for, and it's its own sovereign entity within Basel, Switzerland. The Swiss can't enter it. The Swiss government, police, nothing can enter it without their permission. It's like the Vatican or the Corporation of London. It's its own.
Yeah, see, no, I know.
So I linked a video in the chat. Now, I don't agree with Rocco. Rocco is a self-declared anarchist, and they have some pretty wacky views on some other things, but the Bank of Canada point that they have is excellent. And, you know...
Well, it's that left-right divide. Once upon a time, it was the left wing who was against, like, the big banks and the corporations and stuff. Now they're on board with the HR departments, and it's now with the right, the far right are the ones who don't like this stuff. I mean, what in my lifetime, it's completely flip-flop.
Look at 2001, 9/11, right? Post 9/11, what was it? The media told you had to be proud to fight for your country, a patriot. It was good. And what was the other part? And Islamic people were terrorists, right? Now we go forward to now, right? 15, 16 years later, 17 years later, and it's less than that, obviously, because they've been doing it for years, telling us no, Muslims are very good, even though, you know, Islam seems to not work in our society, and I've revised my thoughts on that too, but Islam is not good in our society, and if you're a patriot, you're a Nazi. You're a fucking bad person. Horrible. Racist.
That's falling apart now.
That's the weirdest thing. Being patriotic is now the worst possible thing.
Yeah. See, that's their biggest error, is that fucking bullshit.
Well, the weird thing, it seems like they used to actually try to hide, you know, all the things. And people didn't really appreciate how corrupt and all the things that Harper was doing. But now, you know, he did kind of a decent job of hiding whatever, and as did the people before him, all the way through, for whatever reason. But, like, Justin Trudeau and all these folks that follow him, they do these things blatantly on TV, out in the open, and no one says anything. And that's what makes me wonder if we really can make any differences, because they're not even hiding it anymore. But you are right, like, here in the Atlantic provinces, people still swear by the CBC. They really do. They think the CBC is actual news, and they've been watching it their whole lives. And it used to be where all the farmers and fishermen got their weather reports, right? They had to have it. So that was the CBC, and they relied on it for all those reasons. And they've just grown up with it. And back in the day, that's all we had, right? There was Channel 2 or whatever the hell it is, and it was CBC, and that was it. And so they didn't change, and that's just the way it is here. And it's so difficult to change people's minds.
Well, CBC, let's look at Bill C-30, buried in the back of that omnibus. Bill, at the very back of it, it says that Parliament officials have control of the CBC's collective bargaining and individual salaries. So if you don't write the correct things, then you're not going to get paid. So,
wow.
You know, and then you get of course, the media, which is the quote-unquote independent media, which is all owned by generally the same groups. I mean, Post Media is the one I kind of rag on, but Shaw...
Yeah, no, there's two big corporations that own everything. Remember we looked at that weird trade of small... Like, they both traded small local papers with some bigger papers involved in as well. and then all of a sudden, bang! The small papers are going bankrupt, or
They just shut them down.
off.
They just shut them down. They buy them and shut them down.
Only if you only get one message. I mean, there's an attempt to only have like, the two are not really against one another.
No, the articles you can put many articles in. I think I've shown that before in videos, where you can put the same article in and you can find it in CTV, CBC, Globe and Mail, and National Post, all verbatim by the same author. What's going on there? So then everybody, especially when it's the right and left newspapers, which are owned by Post in every city in Canada, save Montreal and Quebec. These quote right and quote left papers have the same journalists writing the same articles. Then you're getting the same message in the exact in quote politically diametrically opposed papers, huh? So it's just indoctrination, straight indoctrination.
But a funny thing has happened is that like young people don't read the mainstream media at all. So I don't know what happens to them. But if they're reading BuzzFeed and bullshit like that, they're worse. I don't know how to say that. Or more. It's there's a battle going on. Mainstream media is dying, right?
People need to watch things like what's going on in the House of Commons, right? Steeper 33 is really good for that. There's lots of like actual footage, and actually that's one thing I will say about CBC from what I can tell is that they just stream live in the House of Commons. So really that's what people should do.
So there's a channel, yeah.
Yeah. So but yeah, if people are just listening to whatever they listen, I don't know, I'm a hypocrite because I only listen to the ones I listen to, and I try to listen to crap like CBC, but I get so angry that I have to turn it off. Like just being in the car, the CBC radio isn't a bad program. Some of the new music is there, and then they start talking about all this separating the illegal border crossers from their children, and it's all this Trump and blah blah blah. Like this was a fucking policy long before Trump. All the guy is doing is enforcing the law. And let's not forget that American parents who commit crimes are separated from their children. The policy to you don't want to be separated from your children. Don't cross the border illegally. Don't commit a crime, and you won't be separated from your children.
There's a great from Trump today where he's like, I don't know, something about the last 12,000 children who, I mean, some of them aren't children, but whatever. So, out of the last 12,000 children who arrived here, 2,000 of them are with their parents. But the other 10,000 are just like on their own. They weren't separated from their parents. They arrived. It's a lie.
Oh, it is. It is. Okay, I'll give you a good example. Well, you guys already are aware, but I mean it's really bad. So I go through police press releases around the country, which they don't like to say a lot of stuff, but anyway, Man 42, Toronto Police Services, Man 42 charged in 3 hate-motivated assault investigations. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Man 42. What the fuck does that mean?
3 separate ones, and he did it on a corner taking place from 3 till 9:30 at night. Oh, on Thursday, June 7th, Syed Ahmed Abdullahi was arrested and charged. Now, this got filed. This got filed as a hate-motivated crime. This goes in the stats that Parliament uses. If you go to CBC, most of the newspapers kind of ran an article. They buried it deep down and put the name at the end. But if you go to CBC, it says man charged with assault, and I come across this garbage all the time with them. Man charged with assault after pulling hijabs off the heads of 3 women. Police say all 3 victims were waiting for the bus at Jane Street and Wilson Avenue when the man approached. And then you go through and it says 3 separate incidents.
So that's like
It goes through 3 separate incidents, hate-motivated assaults, in quotation marks. Police allege the course of a single day, blah, blah, blah. It goes on, and then it says that... Where is it here? Sorry, 1 second.
hate crimes have been news speaked into, like...
No, don't...
Something happens to a non-white...
Okay, so police spokeswoman. So that means that they spoke to the police This is the...
Oh, yeah. The HR department lady for the cops.
They spoke to the police. The time of the article is much after the press release, and it indicates in the article that they spoke to the police, and they don't name anybody. They just say it was a hate-motivated crime, which gets filed in the fucking hate-motivated crimes, which I worked out the statistics on them, and they're absolutely unbelievable, the occurrences of these.
I mean...
We're talking that...
There might be something, though, there. You know, all those... The hate crime hoaxes, right? Where, like, there's a Muslim guy, Syed or whatever, who doesn't... He wants to, drop all the fucking old world bullshit and live here. They're much more likely to be the ones who are ripping off fucking hijabs.
Well, they're motivated to do that.
And, but hate crime is always...
They're motivated to do that because then, if you go through the budget that was dropped, and they buried that deep down in there, about all the different fucking programs that they're sprung up as a result of hate crimes, of which I have personally gone through and disproven many of them. But it's a job.
You invent a problem and
straw man.
Come up with a solution. So you have a fake hate crime creates a fucking government program or NGO or whatever it is. Quango, they call it in the UK.
So, I'm hoping that I'll put together I've been working on it for a long time, but I go on and off things, but the actual analysis of every single fucking hate crime, every single one of them, and write a counter report and provide it to politicians. This is as much information as I can obtain. These are the people that are charged, etc. And you're going to see there's a funny pattern. Nobody really gets charged. We have fake hate crimes in there. It's not to say that we're not to say that there aren't real ones in there, but for the literal tens of millions and in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars that we're plunking into this, for the number of cases, the actual hate crimes went down last year and nothing has happened. No M103, nobody's getting really charged with anything. Do you know how many hate crimes that they said that they had all across the country? 136. How many Muslim people live in this country?
So at 99%, I would say that 4 of them are real.
Well, and so 136 people that got Muslim-motivated hate crimes, which they don't like to tell you, but if you dig through their fucking 50 pages of stats, 136 crimes, down 17% from the year prior. And how many Muslims do we have living in this country? 1.1 million people. Chances of getting, being a victim of an Islamophobic crime, you're more likely to be going out with a supermodel, statistically, and I've looked that up.
No, you're more likely to be involved in a hate crime hoax.
Well, I know of a few. I can't say it.
By long stretch, right? I mean that fucking I got kicked off Twitter so many times. But the one, the girl who's like, an Asian man cut my hijab off on my way to school.
Oh, the one at the beginning of the year?
Hmm?
The one at the beginning of the year, you mean?
Koala?
I don't know when that was, to be honest. It might have been last year. Like
It was January.
Yeah, see, like, they all got lost in
January.
the shuffle. Because how many times do we have to go through this, I don't know. Do people learn?
Well, the police told us. The police told us if you dig through the articles, I archived them. The police told us right at the beginning they're not investigating it as a hate crime. They knew all about it, and then she got kicked off, the police spokeswoman, and in came Sidhu. And then what happens 3 days later? Oh, interesting. After it was exposed, Toronto Police OPS on their Twitter feed. Woman reported she assaulted. This is 3 days after it was busted. Woman is reporting that she was assaulted. Reports hijab pulled. Update. This is not being investigated as a hate crime.
There's somebody else trying to rob.
No, it's just fake. It's just they get paid,
Yeah, but if a non-white person is involved in is a victim of a crime, it could just be that you're the victim of the crime. There's no hate there. Especially like some fuckers trying to like steal your purse and they grab your hijab and fucking he grabbed my hijab.
That was one of the crimes.
Let's use her.
It was a robbery, but they never reported that in the media. But she got her purse stolen and her cell phone stolen, and then she said it was an Islamophobic crime.
She mentioned that her hijab was pulled in her official statement, so therefore...
Yes, but the media reported it as a hate crime and left out the fact that her cell phone got taken and her purse got taken in that particular one. While she was dropping her kids off at school.
Yeah, she was legitimately robbed, I'm sure. Hate crime? Are you out of your mind?
Anyways, sorry, I digress. So, what are your thoughts?
Talking about the hate crime statistics?
Just in general about this. Yeah, sure.
Well, it seems that a number of them end up being fake hate crimes anyway, so every time I hear one of these that happens, I always have to take it with a grain of salt, and every time it happens, now, because of how many I've heard that end up being false, I always start thinking that it's more likely that it's coming from someone inside the community. I mean, there's been a number of hate crimes that were against the Jews that turned out to be someone from the synagogue that ended up doing it, whether it happens to be a swastika or something written on the side. So these days, I usually end up going more to the skeptical side before I even end up in the believing it. I need to see more evidence rather than just people calling it a hate crime, especially for how easy it is for people to just jump on that. If we're talking about the Islamic community, then anything that's done against them is considered a hate crime. But sometimes you just, again, I guess you've, like as you put as your title, you need to use those little gray cells. One thing for me, when we were talking about the whole hijab pulling with Paula Noman, the one thing that immediately raised my red flags was the fact that this apparently took place in the middle, it was like 9 a.m. in the morning, on her way to school. Well, anybody who's even been around Toronto in that area knows how busy the Toronto area really is, and the idea that nobody would stop and help or nobody would report it or do anything, that's not Canada to me. So whenever I hear these things, I always take them with a grain of salt first before I even think about believing it. I mean, and the other thing is too, and where we're discussing hate crimes, is people like we have the M103 now, and everyone's saying, well, Canada's a super Islamophobic country. Well, almost, I think every single year in the last several years that I've looked up the hate crime statistics, they always end up being the Muslim community is actually usually ends up third on the list. It always ends up being I think the Jews are number one, and then it's the LGBT community, and then it ends up being the Muslim community. But everyone always wants to make it perceive as if Canada is an Islamophobic country, which it's kind of hard to do when you have such a diverse amount of people that are inside the Parliament buildings. We got Ikra Khalid, who is she's a full-blown Muslim. We have a few others that are full-blown Muslims, and I can't remember the guy's name right now, but that MP the other day who called the entire Conservative caucus racist because they want of the marathon vote that took place on Eid Mubarak, despite the fact the Liberal Party was the one who decided when the voting took place. If this was true and we were living in such a culture that was so terribly systematically racist, none of these people would even be sitting in the Parliament right now because they never would have won the vote. And I think the white vote usually tends to go towards the more conservative votes, so the Conservatives would be winning hand over fist every single time. But this isn't what happens. I wouldn't say that necessarily that diversity means that we have a more integrated culture, but the idea of a systemically racist culture is like, I just don't believe it, because nobody can ever give me any solid proof that it is. You can definitely show me individuals that hold racist beliefs, but the idea of a systemically racist culture to me is just absolutely ridiculous. At least up here in Canada. I'm sure some other places you could do it. I mean, right now, considering what's going on in South Africa, you could easily say that government is systemically racist, but nobody ever wants to point to that. No one ever reports on it, even.
Right. Yeah, algebra. And who scheduled the vote? What a bunch of nonsense. But this is a very powerful stick that they can use, and they know that. Not the Islamic community. The people who are, I maintain, are really behind all this garbage. So if you look at the CTV article, right? Time of this article, 10:58 a.m., updated 2:31, and let's see, where does it say? Oh, sorry, this is the wrong one. Specifically, numerous locations. Does it say? We're not investigating this as a hate crime. Is that this one? Global? Here we go. So Global has this article. Man cuts off girl's hijab with scissors near Toronto school. Say police. Okay, so they're talking to people. Police tell Global News they are not currently treating the case as a hate crime. And then she gets booted off, the media chick. She gets booted off and Sidhu comes in. And yet you get Kathleen Wynn's tweet in here. This is a cowardly act of hatred. Her and Lord went off. The police didn't schedule the press release. I mean, that thing is just a whole...
Because the BuzzFeed readers don't get...
That's Global. Story. Global. And they're writing... Yeah.
The mainstream media is bullshit, but there's also, like, people who the mainstream media who just, like...
And they knew this at 10:30 in the morning.
A whole bunch of them. So they're completely lost. They're like, anti-establishment. I'm reading fucking... Oh.
Well, an image that I just dropped... Sorry, don't mean to cut you off there. What I was just going to say is the image I just dropped into the chat is I'm glad I still have it saved, but as you'll see, it'll say something like item 404 cannot be found. What that was is I ended up saving the website link to the CTV article that was about the hijab hoax. And when I went back to go doing some more research before I ended up putting my video out on it, they completely removed it from their website, which means that, the whole idea of ethical journalism is that if you make a mistake, you either come out with another article claiming you make a mistake, or you make an update to the article where you say you made a mistake, and then you also post where you made, what time and what date you made the update to. But for them, as soon as it came out and it was proven to be false, they completely removed the article, which to me was showing even more suspicious activity.
Are you speaking of ones in the morning, where they said it wasn't a hate crime?
They were saying it was a hate crime. This was happened like right after the story got dropped. It was maybe the same day of. And then a few days later, when we found out that it wasn't a real hate crime, I went back to go read it again, and then that was what I popped up with. I ended up taking a screen cap of it
Yeah.
and saving it, but it was just showing how they were willing to completely forego it. Well, others were at least coming out and saying, well, we made a mistake. It's not actually a hate crime, or she came out and admitted it wasn't a hate crime. CTV just tried to defend themselves by completely removing the article altogether, so you couldn't find it, which to me was even shoddier journalism ethics ever. Which is actually why I've always railed more against CTV than CBC. I found that there was more fake news that came out of CTV than came out of CBC. Although I'm sure some people could.
Yeah,
maybe
they're
debate me on
all
that.
the same. And likewise, that day when they said that there was no hate crime, in the morning of the day, 4 articles, Global, CTV, National Post, what was the other one? And they deleted them all by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then started running this bullshit, which Sidhu didn't even really say that it was a hate crime. And she got there. She got there at the end. They scheduled the press conference without the police being there. I have the tweet from the police saying, "Oh, she's running to get there," and the police and the press conference had already fucking started. They phoned them and then told them that the press conference started. It's just fucking. The whole thing is a fucking scam. We're getting scammed on a grand level.
Yeah. See, this is... Oh, shit, I don't want to get into this, but, like, a lot of the players in that were just compliant based upon their programming, right? Like, they believed it, and they wanted to believe it. Like, there was a hate crime. Set up the stage, let's go. You know what I mean? Like, there are players in that whole thing that weren't... Well, what was the name of the double-named one with the short brown hair?
Board of Education bitch? Oh, yeah, she's the one, I think, who... She knew. They all knew. From the word go. And yet they fucking lied to everyone.
What was her...
Trudeau crying like a fucking baby.
No, but she seemed to be directing the people. Mm-hmm. It was like...
Yeah, I can get her name here.
Yeah, let's get her fucking name.
Let's dox her.
Yeah, it's a...
Well, what kind of a member of a board of education puts a student out after dealing with that sort of thing, I mean, the first thing she should have done was defend her students and not put her up front, especially after what would be considered such a traumatic event. But she had no problem throwing her in front of the cameras. I know it was the mother who called the press conference, but if she had any integrity, she would have told them to not put her daughter out front for that very reason. So she just completely exposed herself in that situation.
In the spirit of social justice,
sorry to interrupt. You know that it was the mother?
That's what I heard anyway. That's what when I was doing research for my video I dropped.
I've been trying to figure out, because let's see if I can find that one article. It's very clear that they're just all saying we didn't do it, and I'm like, what the fuck? Who did it? Who did it then? They all...
Oh, it had that short brown haired lady that was in charge of all.
I'm trying to remember now where I heard it, but I did remember hearing when I was doing research for my video I put out that I heard it was the mother who ended up calling the press
that'd be
conference.
Awesome. That's not even her real name, eh?
No, she would have had to put her signature to allow it. I wouldn't say that she put it on. You know what I mean?
Well, that wasn't even her real name. I found out who it was.
Well, I'm sure they're in at least now.
No, she had a different last name. She still lives there in some fucking shithole in Toronto. Absolute shithole. Not to be offensive, but seriously.
Well, if somebody wants to leave Toronto, I'll miss some family members, but other than that,
And then they go through and they fucking delete the names, and then they uh, obscure the face and all this bullshit. Let's see, where was that article?
And that was the Toronto District School Board spokesperson's name was Sherry Schwartz. Sherry Schwartz
Yes.
Maltz. And that's available.
Yeah, the double name. Yeah, Sherry Schwartz Maltz, whatever.
Yeah.
That's the one who was pulling the string. If you watch the video, there are times where it seemed like she was like, I don't know. It looked like some play on Broadway or
What the
something.
fuck was
I
that?
don't know. Sherry Schwartz, what? What was it again?
Sherry Schwartz Maltz.
Yeah.
I linked the
I think it was
article
double-
in the chat there, so you can just click on that and it'll say below the
If
picture.
anyone with a double name, either, yeah. If you're someone like that, if you give your children a double name, right, and then your children have 4 names, and then your grandchildren have 8 names, and so on, you're just an asshole.
Just because you're adding the extra names in.
Well, no, but you think you're more important than all of the fucking people you know in the history of your lineage. We're gonna do the double name, okay, right? Then the next one goes 4 names, and so on. Like you just
Oh, the fucking name game, man. That's just going into a whole other topic, but I get really tired of the name game. And you can go through Queen's printers and see how many people are changing their name, and they change one letter or they swap the first name for the last name, and then you find them committing multiple crimes under different names. And I'm just like, even the one guy, what was it? The fellow, you guys might know that case, the fellow who in Mississauga who ran down the gas station attendant and killed him.
I don't remember hearing about that.
I got the article somewhere, of course. But he ran down these gas station attendant. He came out to Alberta. Then he was selling crack. He pulled a gun on a police officer here in Calgary. He was up in Edmonton, participated in a gang rape in a laundry room. I think that's how he celebrated his, quote, 18th birthday, which probably would have been January 1st. And
probably 3rd.
yeah, sometime in January. And the police are like, the media asked him, I have the article somewhere, where they asked the Calgary police if it was the same guy, and they're like, oh, it appears that it is the same guy, but the birth dates don't seem to match up. And I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, because
Was this Abdullahi Mahmoud?
It was a Somali, yes, a Somali individual. I forget. And his brother, if you dig in his story, it gets atrocious. His brother, oh no, sorry, that's a different person. I'm getting them mixed up. Yeah, I'm getting them mixed up. But that guy, I mean, he's been out on the streets. Every time you go through his charges, it always says failure to comply. So he's always breaching his conditions, meaning he's constantly getting charged. You know, like this is.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but political correctness, like it. Imagine if some shitbird like that was, Woodstock. It just goes to jail,
See, Sidhu, here we go. Sidhu has been dispatched. She will be on her way shortly. Because they've already fucking called the conference without her. The police. I mean, what the fuck are you doing? This is just such a joke. But
it's above the cops, man.
It is, but it's...
They grab them, and then they're like, we can't do anything with this lineup because there's, like, cat ladies fucking in the judges and the fucking bosses and everywhere.
I see a common thread between all of this stuff. All of it. Whether it's the fake hate crimes, the Islamic stuff, the refugees, the Bank of Canada, the bankrupting of Canada, the suppression of freedom of speech. There's a common thread running through it, you know. I'm not sure if people are there quite yet, but I definitely see it. And, you know, I'm a bit apprehensive to talk about what that involves, but what's your opinion, Adrian?
Well, the way I look at it, whenever I see all these things, to me, it just looks like for one reason or another, it is the destruction of trying to give us our own self-identity and give our country, like, destruction of, I guess, patriotism in a lot of way. And maybe because that for that reason, it has to do with it's easier to control the population when they don't have an idea of like a universal view of what their country means, of what their values are.
Yeah.
The way Trudeau
buys stuff.
the way Trudeau just so easily dismisses Canada as a country and both its values, like he seems to think that Sharia law is compatible in Canadian society, which is now at least Sharia law is available in civil courts, I believe, is the last time I checked, that you can get like a divorce underneath Sharia law these days and have that can be done by an imam. It just, the more I see it, it just seems to be as an orchestrated attempt to take down the people, the entire culture, take down the entire people. And the only reason I could see that could possibly be because it's easier to control the people when they're not more unified, when there's more division among them, which goes again towards the whole politically correct thing. It's just, it has a lot of division in it, in the whole philosophy.
I agree. Yeah, it's control of the people. I don't have verification of this yet, but I have heard it, that Canadian Armed Forces members are training for domestic rioting. And the person I heard it from said that they training sniping. Who the fuck is going to start sniping Canadian citizens? I mean, like I said, I'm trying to get verification of that, and I don't want to, pump out something that's not real, but I mean, that's just unbelievable. But you can see the same element happening over in England, where they have given arrest powers now to literal meter maids, people who do parking authority, have arrest powers. Those are the people wearing the blue vests whenever you see them out in public, and they have full, it says auxiliary, I think. Those people are not police officers, but they have full arrest powers because they're promoting people. The police are now supposed to be doing more frontline shit because they're expecting the country to burn down. And Trudeau built that crap into the new criminal modernization of criminal code. That's what he calls it. So you can go and riot.
You talking about Bill C-75?
Yes. Buried in there is a bunch of things to do with rioting and how that is now considered a. I've got it.
Well, wow, you want me to put my tinfoil hat on for a moment?
This is tinfoil.
Who were the rioters who have been quite silent for the last year or two? Black Lives Matter, Antifa, to a degree.
Sure.
I mean,
it's the coalition. Your words, right? The coalition of the shitty.
Yeah,
and you keep fomenting that anger within people, whether it's people like us or the other side.
But people like Black Lives Matter, they actually burn down downtowns of cities and stuff, right? And it's forgotten. It was 2015 summer, I believe, or 2016. Summer of 2016, I suppose. So it's 2 years away now. We forgot. And they know the protest is not, like, they are fake protesters, right? Like they're invented, right? They're So, what did you say? Something, there's some sort of like change there where, there's going to be like you can't protest. Well, who are the protesters going to be in the future?
It
The real
it's going to be everyone, right? They get us. They get us wound up.
Yeah, but they throw out these shitty people who do all this
Mhm.
bullshit, and they go, "You can't have that any longer."
Because they want the country to burn down. That's the easiest way to control it.
But,
I don't think that's fucking tinfoil. Let's see, riot.
well, just allow me to have it going.
Punishment for a rioter. Okay, so they changed this. Section 65 of the Act is replaced by the following. Punishment of a rioter. Every person who takes part in a riot is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment for not more than 2 years, or an offense punishable by summary conviction. Which means potentially no jail time. How do you control that? They will start cutting both funding to prisons and funding to the Crown Prosecutor's Office, so the Crown will elect to go for a summary conviction. They have things like this. It's similar to do with explosives. You can literally carry a bomb around in public. Possession of explosive. Every person who, without lawful excuse, makes or has in their possession, under the care or control, any explosive substance is guilty of an indictable offense for term not more than 5 years, which was mandatory before. Now, an offense punishable by summary conviction. So you carry around a bomb, no jail time.
Yeah, but the idea, like, when something becomes common, then the offense becomes less, whatever, like, so if we see bombs, then, it makes it okay to make the offense less.
How many fucking bombs have we seen? This is not fucking Malmo, man.
Bombs happened in Canada in, like, back when we were, something real.
We don't see bombs, but he's making it so that it's preemptive. He's taking care of it. You watch. He will cut.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah. That's my tinfoil hat.
And there's more garbage about rioting. There's garbage about obscuring your face, which of course tends to be one side. Sorry?
No, like, who are the protesters? Who's going to riot in the future is going to be us. Right?
Oh, both.
Well, they stand up clowns now. They go, oh my God, those Black Lives Matter people, they're terrible. We need to make laws about this. Even though they were in
Roxham Road. I mean, they somewhere I have the picture of that where they, were blasting around, organizing, getting the buses in Montreal to bring everybody down to Roxham Road for that specific day, just to have this counter rally. I mean, it's organized, it's well funded, and what do we have on our side? In my mind, there's there's two, but then they make you feel like we're going crazy, right? You're racist or you're bad. They want to spank everybody mentally into line.
Yeah.
Well, when I think about this, go ahead.
No.
Okay, well, I was going to say is when you bring this up too, it makes me think too to I think it was Bill C-71, which was the firearms bill that Trudeau recently passed in the last couple months, and not one mention of that had to do anything to do with guns and gangs, but he pretty much all focused on legal firearm owners, and the only thing I can think of with everything that you're already talking about would be is trying to make it as hard as possible for a citizen to have that firearm in case a situation like that ever came up. I mean, I don't like to really go too far into the idea of having to fight against your own government, but it's been shown too many times throughout different countries around the world that it may come down to that point. But what better way to do that than to control the firearms available just to the common people, law-abiding citizens? And I don't know if the statistics are the same in Canada, but I know in America, legal gun owners are actually have some of the lowest amount of crimes committed. They actually have less crimes committed per capita than Congress.
Yes.
So I think that's saying something about legal
Yes.
gun owners. But they're trying to limit you.
All you have to do
Step
is
of the way.
comb through police press releases, and like I said, they're very selective about what they release. I've found one offense, and I go through every fucking city almost every week, and I found one offense that was in regards to a legal gun owner. Oh, well, I mean, I guess you should say something like fucking bushy, but that was listed in the police press releases, which was a gun safe, and it was fucking huge. Like a 500,000 pound gun safe got robbed from a guy. I mean, he had it in this gigantic case, abiding by with the trigger laws, everything. He didn't get charged, of course, but this is the gun was later recovered as an illegal weapon, use of illegal weapon. But I mean, what is the instances? They're absolutely phenomenally low. So you're bang on, Adrian. It's disarm the public. That's what they did in the Soviet Union. You disarm anybody. Same thing they're pulling down in the States. All this bullshit, and you could go into the fake hate crimes. Oh well, they're already getting rid of stuff. Bump stocks gone. And there are mad dogs down there who get guns. I mean, it's very easy to get. Sorry?
The bomb stocks are a funny thing to think about, but yeah, that's true. I mean, Australia, which is also one of the part of the Anglosphere too. There was some, I don't know what it was. It was a mass shooting of some sort back in like the 80s, I think, and they went bang, bang, no more guns.
Well, at least when we're talking about Australia, though, too, it's a lot easier for them to keep the guns out because they're a fucking island.
But they have similar type crazy rules down there. UK, not crazy necessarily, but I think in Canada it's too much. It's far too much. I mean, to get a gun license here, it takes about a year, and that's with the old rules, and they're pretty thorough. They will go through everything, your medical history, your exes, everything. And for the last 5 years, but now they want to change it so that it is lifelong. So every time that somebody goes and renews, they're going to start digging back into people's past, and they're like, I believe, like insurance companies, looking for an excuse not to pay. That's the first thing that they do. Every time they will investigate to find out a way not to pay. And similarly, I think the gun laws are going to be used in the same fashion, where we're going to dig back into your past to be looking for an event simply to take your gun license away. I mean, the CZ, the Swiss Arms, they've already started to withdraw a bunch of weapons without any valid reason.
Well, the other thing is, too, is when we're talking about the idea of...
His internet is awesome. Just step all over him. Fuck him, man.
Well, the other thing is, too, when we're talking about the idea of the military doing these sort of drills, is the fact that I got an article that was from right here, that was from May 25th, 2018, which is talking about the military is now looking for foreign nationals to boost their ranks because they don't have enough people in there. And the idea that if the military is also doing drills against civilians, that they may have foreign nationals fighting in it. Well, they're more likely to pick up a gun against a civilian than another Canadian is. So that's a very concerning idea, especially if we're talking about sniping too. Like you said, sniping was one of the main things they're going on. There's nothing you need to do for sniping except for kill someone. At least if you're these if we're talking about infantry, they could be trained for more urban for urban assault, like not necessarily using their weapons, but maybe possibly just containing the situation. But if you're training snipers, there's only one thing you're doing with that, and that's to kill people.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'll have to verify it, but I don't think it's bullshit. It seems to follow this course that we're on, which is really, really thorough control of citizens. And it's not just the control of, we're under attack from every angle. Our freedoms of speech, our freedoms to earn money, our freedoms to have land. Your fucking internet, root chewing monkey.
Yeah, I can't hear anything he said. Right
Get
now.
out of the gazebo. I have my TV here, though. It's fun.
Well, the other thing is too is when we compare ourselves down to the states when we're talking about this whole situation. The states, at least, they still have military that sorry, not military, militias that are usually more made up of patriot citizens who would be willing to stand up and defend if anything ever came out of this. A couple years ago, I know that I think it was Jade Helm 15, where a military was doing a large amount of military drills down in Texas, and I think it was Ted Cruz that ended up putting out the militia to watch them. At the time, I thought he was just being paranoid. It was unnecessary. But as I start watching more of this stuff take place, it actually seems like it is necessary. On top of that, they at least have their what is considered the largest unofficial military in the world, which is just the average citizen who has their guns, and they have the Constitution to defend that. But Canada has nothing of the sort up in here. Even the ones that we rely on to defend these sort of rights don't do a very good job. Maybe not talking gun laws, but talking something freedom of speech. The Conservatives haven't done that much in federal politics to defend it, and any time that they could defend it, they've completely backed down on any sort of they backed down in doing so. I mean, the perfect example, the most recent one, has to do with Bernier getting thrown out of the shadow cabinet simply because he was speaking out against supply management, which he's done for years. Like, Bernier's been speaking out against supply management for as long as I can remember.
And he got blasted again today with something else.
What was it?
Let's see if I can find out. Quietly booted from industry committee.
Industry committee? Oh, Jesus.
And I think he may be... this is going to make me vastly unpopular, but I don't give a shit because it's the truth that I'm going to speak thus far that I found. Things get revised, but I really don't believe any of these politicians anymore. I've seen proof of the way they step down from their positions. And Bernier actually seems like one of the good guys. And I think it's because of his fiscal beliefs that he is getting rolled over. And it's not necessarily to do with the trade stuff. I mean, that plays a role in it, but it's his position on the Bank of Canada is really big. I mean, if you go to his channel, he has a channel, and he hasn't put out anything in years, literally, but many of his videos are focused on Bank of Canada, inflation, interest rates, why are we getting charged this nonsense? And I don't know if you came across that, but the Bank of Canada originally started as a private institution, then it got nationalized. After it was nationalized, there was a committee, and you start to dig into who's on these committees, then really interesting things happen. But there was a committee to talk about the banking system in Canada, and there were members of Parliament who were asking Mr. Towers, who was the then head of the governor of Bank of Canada, why do we borrow money from an institution that we own at interest? And this was in 1938. Very curious, the timing of everything. 1938, the war happens, and then all of a sudden, it's a non-issue. And not only is it a non-issue, but we get nailed even more. Trudeau starting up his bank, Trudeau Sr. putting us into the Bank of International Settlements, where we're getting rammed with, the last stat I could find was 75% of our loans are going to private institutions. So we're paying all this ridiculous interest. I mean, $1.1 trillion. That is just unbelievable.
It's absolutely atrocious, absolutely. And probably just quickly finishing up on the Bernier thing, probably they were just looking for a reason to throw him out, and the supply management and everything that's gone on was probably just that specific reason. But even when I was looking through the rest of the governors that were appointed to the Bank of Canada, and I didn't get through all of them, but the last three especially, they all have the same connections back to the same people. I mean, Stephen Poloz, who is the current one right now, he was a member of the board of directors for the Bank of International Settlement, which owned by the Rothschilds. We have Mark Carney. And Mark Carney was, he had a 13-year career on Goldman Sachs, again, owned by the Rothschilds. David Dodge is a chairman of the board of directors for C.D. Howe Institute, and at least the Rothschilds are a member of the C.D. Howe Institute. But I also happened to notice when I was looking through the list, Morneau Sobecco is also sits on that same one, and that was when Morneau and Scheppel ended up merging with Sobecco in 1997. They became Morneau and Sobecco, literally Bill Morneau's company right now. So it's as I started looking into it, I realized that it was coming all back to the same people. And I mean, I'd seen a lot of documentaries and heard a lot about the Rothschilds, but I thought it was always blown out of proportion. But until I started doing this a couple weeks ago, I never really realized how much of a connection
Have you gone into the Warburgs much?
A little bit, but I haven't been able to. I haven't found too much yet. I'm probably going to do more of that after we're done. After this, I'll probably do, because you really put me down a deep rabbit hole here that I'm very interested to get to the bottom of, because there's just so much information here. But I've started compiling a list of all those people, people like that who are just all have connection to each other, who seem to be the ones that are pulling the strings.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're going to come across that. That's the thing. If multiple people are working on it and collaborating at the same time, people are going to come up with all kinds of information that other people don't find. But I mean, it starts to get really spooky. The ties between the intelligence services in the United States and the banking institutions, the foundations of the CFR, Trilateral Commission, and the Bilderberg Group. Bilderberg Group was founded by... Then you start to go into the media. It just gets... And then the pumping out of stuff to do with war, and the seeming, I believe, intentional creations of war, simply as money, revenue generating industries, so that they can just rack up more debt. I mean, we're talking about probably billions of people who have died for the control that a few select individuals are seeking, who are disgusting individuals in many cases. Bronfman's tied to Nexium down in the United States. I mean, that's not tinfoil. And even the principle of tinfoil, where did this come from? 1963, I believe. It was a concept developed by the CIA. So that...
You mean the idea of being a tinfoil hat?
Yes, the idea of asking questions about anything and being conspiracy theorist. What is a conspiracy theorist? Can't anybody sit there and ask a question about anything, like whether the moon is made of cheese or whatever? I mean, who cares? Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, but if that doesn't mean you're a bad person or you're insane. But the CIA, very heavily tied to this. C.D. Jackson, I'll throw that name out there. That guy is just, vomit. And in the Department of Psychological Warfare, specifically in World War II under Eisenhower. You dig through there, and Eisenhower and what he was doing, and the Morgenthau Plan. I mean, there is a lot of stuff that we haven't been told, and it's very intentional, and it's very sad. One night, I read a lot of stuff, and I've seen a lot of bad things. It's probably not good for my psyche over the last few years, but about a month ago, I think it was, maybe a little bit longer. It was something like that, just after I kind of stopped, and I was digging through stuff, and I literally was learning about stuff, and I started crying. Like, it was just horrible. Horrible. And it's not fake. The documents are all there. I mean, whether you go to Russian archives or multiple witnesses or Congress archives, even Canadian archives, it's just disgusting.
I've started to see at least some of the spooky stuff that you've been talking about, and I'll I'll definitely be in contact with you again once I start reaching that disgusting point. But there are a few things that I've started to notice too, and I mean, I think I mentioned that last time we spoke, that one was off air, that in the past, and even now, I've been very defensive of Israel's position, but I've started to notice certain things that are starting to shake me a little bit. Like, the one thing is that I noticed that it was Benjamin Netanyahu who was the one really going around the world right before the Iraq War that was talking about Iraq was building the weapons of mass destruction, which we never found there. And he was talking about how the Mossad had found this information, how it was pretty much they had Iraq dead to rights on these weapons, yet nothing ended up getting found. Yet Halliburton made a fortune off the oil sands that were right there. I started to notice that when we're talking about ISIS, it seems to be a lot of their fighting just happens to take place along the oil sands in the Middle East. That doesn't seem to be much of a coincidence. And then maybe a week ago, I saw a video do you know the channel Press for Truth? Yeah, I was watching one of theirs where the guy, I can't remember his name right here, Dan Dix.
Sorry.
Yeah, he dug up a document which was it was like an original document from back in like the mid 1800s or something like that, which was literally showing that the Rothschilds had purchased Jerusalem, at least Jerusalem at the time. Yeah, and that to me was just sort of an eye-opening thing. I mean, I'll still say that I'm defensive of Israel's right to survive because I feel like a lot of people still feel that they don't have any right to exist, but there seems to be a large connection there that I'm starting to notice now, which is sort of shaken me a little bit when I've started looking into this.
I will probably get into that down the road here, but I don't think that there's much time left probably to actually speak out against some of this stuff, but sorry, damn phones.
I have the same alarm.
Yeah, I think that's that Samsung stock alarm. My views on things have changed quite drastically. My opinions now are I don't really give a flying fuck about anybody outside of this country. And I don't want to be financing anybody out of this country. I don't want to be selling weapons to anybody out of this country. I don't want to be involved in anybody else's wars. They can sort it all out for themselves because they have agendas. All of them have agendas that aren't... Shut up. Agendas that don't coincide with our agendas. And... I bought a lot of stuff that I don't necessarily believe in anymore. A lot of things. Hook, line, and sinker. I thought it was all, oh yeah. But that's the nature of manipulating people's emotions, which is very powerful, and we see that even on the most base issues. Oh, poor koala's hijab gets cut, right? Shut up! That plays with people's emotions because inherently people are good. We're all good people. I believe that. Most of us. But it's not this business about being manipulated and controlled by outside influences that shouldn't have any place messing around with our political systems for their own agendas. It's just highly inappropriate. Highly inappropriate. Canada is a country that has its own citizens and that people should be taken care of. Their own citizens. But, I don't know.
Well, I also find that when we start listening to these outside influences, it starts corrupting us on what our values are. You know, like Canada has never really been a country that just jumps into war unless there was a reason for it. I mean, aside for World War One and World War Two, which I guess we kind of did get dragged into that by the British more or less, I still feel like Canada probably would have gotten involved because of everything going on. But we've never been more like our American counterparts, which has jumped into almost every war that that they can, you know, and I'm sure they have their own reasons for it. A lot of it has to do with the influence that America holds over the country, but we're a very different nation than them, and the idea that we're starting to maybe get corrupted in that way is not one that I really like. It's just we are a different people, we have different values, and we need to preserve those, but those seem to be going by the wayside more and more every single day.
I completely agree. And maybe I'm tinfoil. And like I said, things are ever evolving for me, but I definitely have some opinions that are going to be not very popular with people, I would think. But I don't believe, when I really do a lot of soul searching within myself, I'm not a hateful person. I care about anybody, but it's when I get lied to and I see people suffering, dying, bankrupted needlessly, I have a real problem with it. Not even just needlessly, intentionally. Very intentionally.
And it's such a close-knit circle too, because the other thing I found out when I was more looking into the banks, which I thought was maybe a little weird, was that usually we look at it with the big five banks of Canada, but you could technically also say there's six if we're talking about the National Bank of Canada. But if you start looking at their major shareholders, every single bank is a major shareholder of each other, whether that's Scotiabank, RBC, BMO, TD. They all are related to each other. They are, like, every single one is a major shareholder in each other's stocks, and it's just that alone is sort of starting. It just looks to me like there is some manipulation going on behind.
Well,
the scenes.
lend us the money, and then we bail them out. A lot of people don't know about Harper and his bailout program, and he bailed out a lot. And now the introduction of the bail-in program really is a very scary idea, because then now they're going after people's money. And many of these policies you can find all across the world. Similar things. The House Resolution 569 is almost a direct duplicate, I believe it's 569, of M103. The bail-in programs are Germany, Austria, UK, Australia, Canada. Those are the only, and I just started on them, and they're all the same. Seize people's money, give them shares. What the fuck shares? What is my shares worth? Your bank is bankrupt, and the government.
I was just going to say that until I started going down this path from the last time we spoke, I didn't even realize that Harper gave a bailout to the banks, and then that came up in some of the research that I was going through, and that kind of shocked me, because that should have been one of the first things they brought up. I mean, they brought up the bailout of, I think it was Bombardier, and I think it was GM Motors, or some of the big ones that they mentioned, but nobody ever mentioned that the banks were bankrupt. And a lot of areas seem to think that Canada has a really solid banking system, but it doesn't seem to be that way at all. We're just sitting on a house of cards that's ready to fall at any moment.
Well, yeah, I think economically, definitely. I mean, I don't like. I'm going to talk to a couple of people about my money, and I'm going to ask them, because I'm not. After reading what I've been reading, I'm not very convinced that any of my money in banking institutions is safe at all at this point in time. Because, I mean, with the fractional reserve lending, the outstanding liabilities is unbelievable. I'll just give you this one stat from CDIC. And, I mean, that is because people are like, oh, my stuff is guaranteed. Really? This is from CDIC website. Okay, so provisions for insurance losses, 1.6 billion. Sounds good. The insured deposits from member institutions increased by 43 billion. Oh, sorry, to 6% from the balance. They've got 6 cents on the dollar covered.
Oh, that's awful. Jesus. Yeah, I'm just looking at it now that you've got on the video there. 6 cents on the dollar. Most of your money is gone anyway, so it doesn't matter. I mean, the idea that anything's guaranteed is a little naive. Nothing in this life is guaranteed. So, anybody who would actually buy into that is a little bit of a fool, if you ask me. Do you think it's actually possible that we could return to the gold standard in this day and age?
Well, we don't apparently, but you see, everybody's going to argue against that who is in the powerful positions, right? Because they don't want to go back to that. Because if we went back to the gold standards, that means we're a silver standard or some kind of metal that is limited. That would mean that our assets are 100% guaranteed. I mean, I have some old money downstairs, and I tried to find some stuff, but of course there's no gold certificate. 1929 was the last year, though I have some older money, and it says payable to bearer, but I don't think it means anything. But if we return to that, that would mean that 100% of our assets were guaranteed. So that would mean that no banks would fail. That would mean inflation rates, would be I believe, very much kept in check. I mean, Ron Paul's another guy I'm really starting to like. And he went after Bernanke, and he advocates for people to have their own money because we deserve to have our own money. Why should the money that you make not be the money that you keep in your pocket? And instead of this ballooning government, which in all appearances seems very intentional to bankrupt, there is no way that I think there may be a way to get out of debt, but you keep spending atrocious amounts of money just so that the interest rate goes up, the service payments. I mean, and they don't even like to tell you. You read through the bail-in program. I'm used to reading legalese, and I'll tell you, it's a lot of gobbledygook. Honestly, I'm like, what? I don't understand what the fuck they're saying. And then you read the press articles. Press article came out, and it was Globe and Mail, and it said Trudeau assures everybody, it's just fine. They have a special slush fund set aside. Well, if they had a special slush fund set aside, why would they ever get in trouble? They don't. But they're outstanding, and Canada has 0% reserve. 0. As opposed to the United States, I think it's 10. 0. So they don't even they can just lend out, keep lending out the circle of money. It just gets huge, and then I showed that of the amount of money that they're printing. And Carney's up there, and he's like, Bernier's asking him, about the inflation, and he's like, oh yes, Canadians have come to expect a 2% inflation rate. What the fuck are you talking about, man? I don't want any inflation.
I'd like to keep the same value in my dollar as there was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I never want there to be any more inflation than necessary. The other problem, though, too, is when we're talking about the gold standard, at least in Canada, is the fact that most of our gold has been completely sold off by now. I think it was Brian Mulroney who originally started that, but as I kind of looked through, they were saying that by the time Justin Trudeau took office, we had about $110 million worth, US dollars worth of gold. A month later, it was 102 million US, and by January we were down to 58 million US, and then it became 24 million dollars US, and that all happened over a matter of a few months. Canada actually has a pretty good Canada has a pretty good deposit of gold too. I think we're actually a pretty big player when we're talking about gold.
80th place
but yet
in the world.
Is that what they're saying? 80th
My
place when it
stats
comes to gold?
are different, but I'd be most interested in yours. But yes, that's what I came across. That we're 80th in the world for the amount of gold reserves that we have. We don't have very much.
Oh.
Um,
Yeah, talking about gold reserves,
Oh.
we are pretty low. I mean, I think we actually can mine a fair amount of gold. I think underneath our ground, we actually have a fair amount of gold here in Canada, yet we've sold it all off. I don't know where that's going. Probably my guess is to the U.S., to Fort Knox
they
or
don't
something
have any
like
gold.
that. But
They don't have any gold. Who was that? It was Ron Paul that asked. Who was the in charge of the Fed at that point? And he said, "Are you moving gold around?" Meaning the Federal Reserve in New York, across the street, literally across the street, is where much of the world's gold was kept. So there's rumor that there's tunnels underneath and that they move gold back and forth between vaults and things to when different countries want to come and see their gold. Now, if you look it up, Germany wanted all of their gold back, and they had to wait. I can't remember how long it was, 2 years or something like that. They couldn't even go and look because they're playing funny games with people's gold. And eventually, I think they've got some of it back now. They got all of it back from London and Paris. But they've got some, and why are they doing that? And this was quite a few years ago. Why are they taking their gold back? Because the stories that we're running is that they expect to go back on the Deutschmark. Back then, you look at Deutsche Bank right now, absolutely is in the toilet, and this is one of the biggest banks in the world. Its stock has gone down from $50, $60 a year ago to, I think today it was at $11. And they're laying people off like crazy, and they're expecting to tank. And if they tank, that's going to be a very interesting scene. But again, why? They shouldn't be tanking because they're playing money. They just go out and do more and more risk because they don't have any accountability to anybody. Why is it that the Bank of Canada, on the Board of Governors, we have the Department of Finance has an ex officio who sits as a board member, and then you can go to their website and there will be a little asterisk, I'm sure you did. Other people can go to their website and there will be a little asterisk beside their name, and it will say, has no voting rights. Pardon? It's our bank. It's our bank, and we don't have any voting rights. And he, even if he did, it would be one of 13. But it's built in the Bank Act of Canada that the Department of Finance will never have will have somebody who sits on the board but never be allowed to vote. Where is that? Jesus, I always have so much crap.
Well, that's a nice loophole that they've given them, that you can sit on the bank but not have a vote when you're talking about your own money there. Huh. Unbelievable. I mean, the more I look into when we're talking about stocks too, the more I can't help but feel that they're manipulated. I mean, I think I mentioned at the beginning that it seemed like during the Great Depression that the crash was almost calculated. That it seemed like all the big investors were pulling out right at the same time, and then that probably triggered the initial drop, and then everyone else got scared and ended up pulling their money out. But the other thing I found out too, and maybe it's just coincidence, but I don't know, I'm finding it hard to just chalk it up to coincidence, although I don't have any proof to back my theory, was that it turns out that October 24th, 1929 is when the crash came during the Great Depression. Well, it just so happened that in 2008, it was also October 24th when we started to see the crash in the stock market. So maybe it's possible it's just coincidence, but I don't know. The fact that they ended up coming out on the same day, and then the 2008 crash was one of the worst that we've had since the Great Depression, just seems a little suspicious to me.
No, I think you're probably right. There is funny things about numbers and stuff like that, and I know that gets into tinfoil stuff. There are numbers that people like, and within certain let's see here, within certain ideologies, numbers are important. So here's the board of directors. And if you look down here, Paul Rochon, ex officio, Deputy Minister of Finance, member of Executive Committee. Let's see, how do I jack that up? It says right here. It's probably not going to come through over the stream, but it says the Deputy Minister of Finance sits on the Board of Directors but has no vote. And if you go through the Bank of Canada Act in 1935, we never have a vote. It's our bank. We never have a vote. It controls inflation. It controls interest rates. It prints money at exorbitantly huge rates, thereby manipulating everything, causing more and more debt for us because it borrows from the private banks, and then we don't have any say in it. So even though it's a national bank, technically, it's not. It's not. And I think we can thank Mr. Trudeau because we were humming along basically, I think, $13 to $18 billion per year, which is really reasonable. And during that time, we built Trans-Canada Highway, St. Lawrence Seaway. We had large infrastructure programs going on, and we didn't have this huge, overpowering debt, which people nowadays slave their day away just to keep their heads above water, simply to pay their taxes, because the spending programs in this government have ballooned out of control, and I think part of that is to keep racking up the debt.
It would seem that way. Looking at the American system, that almost seems like what they've done. I don't know what their debt is right now, but I think it's something like 17 or 18 trillion dollars, and that's all got to come crashing down eventually. And it's a good way to take down America too, since they are they've had some of the most influence in our world for a long time now. That economically, that they're going to just come tumbling down due to this whole the whole fiat currency and the way that their private banking works. And we're not far behind if that was to happen, especially being the biggest trading partner that we have. And it all just comes back again. I guess I've said it maybe a few times, but it all just comes back to the exact same people. And I'm sure I've only hit the tip of the iceberg in this situation. I'm probably going for more of the usual ones you hear, whether that's talking about Soros or Rockefellers or Rothschilds or any of them. But
well, they're big players. I mean, Rockefeller, I didn't know that last night. I learned that Rockefellers donated the land for the UN. 6 square blocks. Just gave it to them, bought it and gave it to them. And Rockefeller, one of the Rockefellers, Population Control Council, I mean, they're into some fucked up shit. Eugenics. Look at Gates. Gates is into eugenics. They are really living in a different world. Totally. And it's totally devoid of any kind of logic, and in my opinion, very opposed to you and I. Except for one thing. What do we have left? We're already debt slaves. And they control, I think, in large part, a lot of our minds. I would say, just for me, yes, they do. Because I notice that now. I know where I can see the images that they sew into media, into music, and into TV shows or movies, trying to get you to buy into their nonsense, counter logic nonsense.
You can also see sort of where they're making their marks too on certain people. I mean, a good way would be in Hollywood. We see the way that they act, and that's a good way to control the people. But even certain politicians, the way that they present themselves. Not too long, I don't know how long ago was it actually, but there was one time where Jagmeet Singh was in front of us on stage in front of a group of people, and he was pretty much trying to tell them, you know, like, these days they're trying to make people actually believe that the government isn't their friend and that taxes are a bad thing. But this is exactly what's led us into these problems to begin with, is that people who trust the government and people who just want absorbent amount of taxing on the individual people. Time and time again, it's been proven, and Russia is the Soviet Union is the best example. It's one of the longest serving examples about how it's just used to keep you in line and prevent you from getting out of control in any way. Anyone who stepped out of line was immediately taken down. And I'm waiting for it that they're going to start now trying to encourage the people, the citizens, to start spying on each other, because that was another big one that happened in Russia. Is they had, I think it was 2 in 5, I think, Russian citizens at the time were government informants, and that was usually done through blackmail. As far as I know, they had something on you, but that meant that there was more likely that somebody in your immediate household was spying for the government for them on them. So I'm waiting for that to start coming into place. I mean, they already have our secret services and stuff spying on us, but nothing better than having people on the ground that can report directly to you.
It's very true, but we live in a technocracy now, where everything is about, quote, big data. Everything is farming every single thing about you. Whether it's the stupid trivia app on my game, which I was reading through their privacy, and they're like, you know, if you have Facebook, we're going through your Facebook friends, we're going, you know, like your GPS location. If you have the GPS disabled on your phone, we're pinging towers around you to figure out where you are. You know, all of that big data has been amalgamated, like you were talking about in your video, and it's being amalgamated for a very good reason, to keep information on all of us, to keep us in line. There is no, I can't see a direct purpose how it's helpful. And it was originally sold to us, you know, specifically with the Patriot Act, which again, you know, I have some very mixed feelings about 9/11, but sold to us with this, and everybody bought into it, including me. And I was like, oh, you know, this is good, and it's just been a downhill slope ever since. More monitoring. I mean, there is wings of the government that people just have no idea about. There's a wing of the government that specifically just monitors social media. That's it. What is it, the CSE or something? I made some stupid meme for them a while back because I knew a couple of their people were following my Twitter account. So every morning I would just blast it out, you know, good morning with a kissy face. And the web page, a picture of their web page, CSE I think it was, or something like that. And it's like, you know, and who knows about that kind of stuff? I mean, they just keep mining data on all of us. And why? Because, oh yeah, here it is. The Communication Security Establishment. And all it does is go around and watch people's Twitter feeds, your YouTube, your whatever. And I think I've seen, yeah, your YouTube channel has gotten in trouble a couple of times. You know, when Derek rants, I know his channel is big time in trouble, and I know my channel is in trouble. Anybody who speaks out and tells the truth or just simply says to people, hey, listen, these are some things I've come across. Maybe you might want to look at them, or what, stop and think for a moment. Not you have to think like this or you have to do this. Maybe just something you might want to look into. That becomes a big no-no. Because they know that people still have the freedom of mind somewhat left.
Well, this whole idea about collecting people's data, that was actually one of the main reasons that I never ever got the game Pokemon Go, because it was huge a couple years ago, but you literally were walking around with your camera on, with your GPS on, just everything about you was exposed right there. So, like, I mean, I probably would have gotten it for a little amount of time if I wasn't too concerned about that sort of thing. But, and I guess at the time I was a little more, I didn't really tell people, I just told people I wasn't interested. But the real reason behind it was just the idea of them collecting our data just like that. And maybe I was feeling like I was getting a little too tinfoil in that. But as I started up my YouTube channel, as I've started looking into more of this stuff, I think I made the right decision on that one. By the way, I see that at the bottom there. Good morning, CSC. I like that.
Well, I just get tired of their garbage, Like, there's one guy on my account, he's anti-terrorism expert, or anti-terrorism Surete de Quebec and CSIS. His account doesn't say that, but you dig through him, that's what he is. And, I'm like, well, whatever, go fuck yourself, man. You can follow me all you want. There's nothing that you can do, really, to stop any of this trash. That's the sad thing. Once upon a time, I used to be really crazy about it, and I still am. But VPNs, they're going the way of the dodo. They're getting rid of that. And, certain things, you disable the GPS on your phone. Google still admits that they're monitoring you. It doesn't matter. Christ. And this stuff just really starts to spiral out of control. I still have that video. I never released it on some of the stuff that they've got, which is just, the technology is unbelievable. Billions of faces, facial recognition software now that can identify over a billion faces in 10 seconds.
Jesus, that's scary right there. And then, I mean, even our phones, there's been some reports talking about how your phone, sometimes your microphone turns on so it can hear you speak. Your camera sometimes gets turned on so they can see into your home. I mean, there's just a lot of scariness behind it. And a while ago, I don't remember how long ago it was, but there was this video I saw, and it's possibly the scariest thing of them all, which had to do with there was these people that were working on a software which could take your face and then they could make you say whatever they wanted. I think they showed a picture of George Bush and doing that, where they had him, like, they were moving his mouth and making him say whatever it was that they wanted. I think they were also working on manipulating your voice as well, from just doing this sort of thing, just talking online or talking
30
on
seconds.
the phone.
30 seconds of audio. Lyrebird, it's a Canadian company, but Google has a far better one, where it will perfectly mimic your voice with 30 seconds of audio. And we all have 30 seconds of audio online, guaranteed. Anybody who's spoken on a phone. I mean, the shit that they're gathering is just crazy. Like this report I just pulled up. Police body cams, soon to have Minority Report AI facial recognition software. And that's brought to you by, I believe, Amazon. The digital TV, it's monitoring everything that you're watching. Anything and everything that you can think of that puts out any kind of a digital signal is monitoring you. Your fucking car, the GPS location on your car. And it knows, because all you need to do is gather metadata, who's in the car, who you're associating with, where you're going, roughly what you're doing, your credit card data. Then they know what you're buying. They may know your sins, right? I mean, drug dealers now can use credit card scans.
And actually, yeah, you brought up the metadata thing. I actually found an article a while back, and I ended up saving it. It was from ARS Technica, and the article's The article is called "Surprise, Surprise! My online metadata actually reveals where I've been," and it was this company that ended up the yeah, it was a company that ended up deciding to try and track one of their people simply using their metadata, and the person ended up going through a few different cities, across California, and I think they actually have they got a map on the website on the article there. I'm pretty sure that's where he ended up going to. I've just linked it in the chat if you want to check it out.
Thank you.
But that was going back, I think, to when the whole Edward Snowden incident, where they were just their defense after they found out the NSA was collecting all the data. They were saying, well, it's just metadata, you know, it just says who you phone called to, you know, it's not a big deal. We can't hear what you're saying, but again, if they can track you wherever you're going simply on your metadata, we all have metadata. That's actually one of the reasons I've thought that my next phone, I've actually seriously considered going back to a flip phone, something a little more basic instead of a smartphone.
I knew that. I just know that from something else. Yes, dumb phones. That's why they got rid of dumb phones. Analog phones did give you some security in terms of, and the smarter, you know, the newer phones that you get, the crap that's just built in it. Everything's built in. You know, syncing your phone. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Then you'll start to figure out who are big players in the data gathering. Certain countries are very good at data gathering, and they're not maybe ones that would be the first ones to come to mind. And they're actually, well, I'm speaking of one country in particular, but they're not well known for that, but not well known as in publicly, but within the intelligence community, you know, they're number one probably, and they're very proud of it, and they're happy to talk about it. And they use programs, they sell the fucking Department of Defense programs. I mean, the intelligence community within the United States. So they're monitoring all their garbage too. So it just becomes a gigantic clusterfuck to eventually control your mind. And as tinfoil as that may sound, it isn't, because we can already see evidence of that starting to come out in terms of the targeted influencing things that come up in your social media, making you think certain things. You know, so I think YouTube is experimenting with channels that are completely fake as in fake video, fake person, just AI. You got the Twitter, what was that, Microsoft. Yeah, it just keeps going on, the fake Twitter accounts that have AI technology. Or they say your friends like all this. So Facebook is quite open. Two of their executives have come out and said that they specifically social engineer people's emotions, that some of their stuff probably has led to people's suicides, and that they don't care. You know, they want to control your mind. And so how advanced really are we? I don't think we're that advanced. I think it's actually pretty sad. I would like to go back in time. Agriculture days when we were an agrarian society. You know, people could depend upon themselves. They could take care of themselves. Family units were stable and controlled, generally. People were good to one another. Used the principle of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Only takes 5 minutes in traffic or entering into Costco to know that's fucking way gone.
It's unfortunate. I've thought about the same thing too, about going back to a simpler time. Actually, in some ways, I think that's why I want us to get out of the city. It's just go back to like a small town or something, because at least some small towns still have that idea, you know, whether we're talking about community or a little bit more simpler. But as it stands, when we're living in the big cities, we're just sort of, there's not much we can do right now. Everything we do, every step is monitored, and they're making sure that you're not you're not going away from the status quo. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's scary how accurate the book 1984, how accurate it is these days. I mean, we might not be quite in that area yet, but give it a little more time, and I'm sure that that book will be bang on the money. It's absolutely amazing that how accurate that book is.
And what was his past? What did he do in his... I mean, these people are all tied to intelligence, right? Where is this? Forbes magazine. Technocracy is a big thing, you know, and that started in the 1950s, I believe it was. And that's very much playing a very critical role in what's going on today. It's predictive. Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better. I've read this before on here, and so anybody who's not familiar with this article, I would suggest reading it. It's fucking freaky, man. And this is coming from the World Economic Forum, Forbes magazine, and they're talking about the one line where the chick is like, they're monitoring my dreams and my thoughts, but it's okay. What are you, out of your fucking mind, man? This stuff, you know, I shouldn't get mad, but it's seriously, it drives me a little bit batty that we're all just kind of, the pot is boiling away, and that's not even it. There are many people like us that are awake knowing that things are going wrong, and even the people that are asleep, and who knows how awake we are. Who knows how much I'm getting manipulated. I don't even know that. But the people that are asleep know that something isn't right. They know that they didn't have to work as hard before. They know that their grocery bills cost them a lot more money. That people are more violent now. These things just weren't an occurrence to the frequency that we have now, because society rooted these elements out. They made them, they ostracized them. They just simply said, we don't want any of that. We don't want a part of that. You know, you're a bad person. That person didn't get friends. Now behaviors that are bad, what I would deem morally bad, are rewarded, and people strive for them. Well, I want to be a CEO because if I'm a CEO, I make lots of money, but I get to step all over lots of people to get there. You know, I'm not a communist. Don't get me wrong, but it's just the principle. It's so what has happened to us, very carefully engineered, so that we just don't care for one another. That the disconnect between people. Texting all the time. Text. Not pick up the phone, have a conversation with somebody. Or go and see, but worse yet, go and see them. Go have lunch with them. No. Shoot them a text. Even though, and I've been guilty of that at times, even though I've texted people and I'm like, you know, I don't really even want to say hello to that person, but I'll just do it to be polite. I mean, that's fucking disingenuous and dishonest.
But at the same time, the same time about something like that is we've actually lost so much of the community cohesiveness that we've gotten to this point where we can't even have a real conversation. We can't even have real friends. I mean, a lot of people that I know too, they are satisfied with just giving somebody that they know a text, and that's completely it. And a lot of ways, it does look like some people out there are zombies, you know? They just walk around with their phone constantly looking down. I can't tell you the amount of times I'll be talking to somebody and they'll just pick up their phone and be texting away, and I can already tell that they're not listening to me anymore, which it doesn't bug me if you need to shoot off a text, like somebody quickly texts you and like maybe you just say a quick hey or something like that. But I've been around them where they're having two conversations, one with me and one with on their phone. I can be talking to them for 5 minutes, and the entire time they'll just be sitting there, and they can't do anything better than that. It's gotten a little sad.
You know, even the people that's shooting off the one random text, are they saying to you, excuse me for a second? I don't know, maybe they do. You know, and if they're a closer friend, they probably do. But lots of people will just be, they won't even say. Their attention is already gone somewhere else, and, you know, they won't be polite enough to just say, can you hold on a second? Sorry, somebody just texted me. You know, I'm really interested in what you're saying.
I don't ever get that at all. And that's the other problem that too when we're talking about social media. The one thing about my social media is that I don't care anymore. Maybe I did at one time, but I don't care anymore how many followers I have or how many likes or dislikes I have on a video. I mean, I did definitely especially when I started my YouTube channel, I was always paying attention to my analytics.
Don't believe
and
them.
things like that.
They're lies.
But I don't.
I can prove them to you. They're lies.
Exactly. I've heard a lot of people that have been telling me that, and we have enough evidence of suppression of certain videos and certain sites. But the reason I know I stopped caring as much about them, and I'll appreciate everyone that subscribes to my channel, no doubt. But it's just the one reason I just can't care anymore as much as I used to is the fact that you get too involved with them, and then that's all you care about, which is probably why a lot of people these days aren't really paying attention to the really important stories. They want to make sure that their latest tweet that they put out or Facebook post is getting all the likes on it. I remember there's one quick clip from Family Guy where Lois puts out a couple things on her Facebook, and nobody has ever clicked on her, clicked like or anything like that. So then she just scrolls down a few images, and then she clicks like on her own, and she's like, that'll get it started. And that's pretty much the point that people are at. Instead of paying attention to the news or that, they want to see how well their accounts are doing. And because of it, no one really pays attention to the real problem. It allows the people that are trying to manipulate us to get away with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they want to do that. I mean, that is, to me, that isn't being, oops, I made a mistake. That is being openly malicious. And they admit it themselves. I mean, suicide, like this CNN article, U.S. suicide rates increased more than 25% since 1999. That doesn't say to me that people are happier.
No, absolutely not. It's just saying that it's worse. I mean, sure, many of these suicides may come from mental illness, but how do we know that a lot of the way that we're interacting with each other right now isn't the cause of this mental illness? Something like depression is not necessarily in and of itself a mental illness, like something like borderline personality disorder, but it just means that you're unhappy. And if you're not changing anything that you do to make yourself happier, then you're just... then of course there's going to be a much larger increase in suicides these days.
Money, another big one. People get in relationships because I think that's really sad to see people get into relationships of convenience. To buy a house. They really don't even care about the other person at all. But simply to buy a house, they will be with somebody, that's just sick. I'm sorry. Because the prices are fake. The prices are fake. Fake. They're not real. Not just the cash. Sorry to cut you off. Not just the cash is fake. The price is artificially inflated, and the banks do that.
Well, even that these days too, it may not even be that. I used to know somebody that I don't interact with them anymore. But this person ended up full out saying that they were with they've been with their girlfriend for a few years, and they are not in a good relationship together. It's a very bad relationship. But the one thing he always said was that he would rather be unhappy and with someone than be alone. And this is just, to me, is showing a bigger problem than this. It's just the fact that he would be with someone who treated him like complete dirt. Simply because he didn't want to be alone. Like, that was his biggest fear in life, when he could have done way better, found someone way better that would be that would actually care for him. And I mean, when I say this is bad, I mean, like, she slept with other guys, he knew about it and didn't hold it over her. Like, this is the sort of relationship that they had together.
Wow.
There's a reason I'm not putting out any names or anything like that. I wouldn't want to expose the guy that way.
Dox. Let's dox him. Shame them into it.
But I think there's a lot of people that are like that these days, and whether that happens to be for financial reasons or whether that has to be with just because they have this idea that they can't do any better because they have such low self-esteem. It's just a sad point for people to be at. I mean, there's always been those people in society, but I've noticed that it's a much larger percentage of people that are in these sort of relationships. And I'm sure that hookup culture also plays a factor into that. Just these days, it's no big deal to go sleep around
Sure.
with anybody.
But again, that plays into the Communist Manifesto, which has that's another plank. The promiscuity, the mass pornography, the censorship, loosening the rules of censorship on pornography and those kinds of things, but tightening them in other areas. No, you're absolutely spot on. And yeah, the emotions that people derive from social media, it's quite sad. People, I notice that people that I don't really pay attention to Twitter anymore. That's the only social media I basically use other than YouTube. But I don't really care too much about it. But, periodically I'll see somebody who follows me, and then I follow them back, First of all, I'm polite, and second of all, I think most everybody has a reasonable thing to say, even people who I disagree with, because that keeps my mind, my opinions evolving. Anyway, as long as they're not using ad hominem attacks. So then the people will boot you. And they want to have the, 25, they're following 25 people, but they have 600 people following them. Like, there's some fucking person that's important. I'm just like, go fuck yourself, man. You are zero. If you have to derive pleasure from that, that's pretty sad. That's pretty fucking sad.
Absolutely. I very rarely actually unfollow people on social media or on whatever it happens to be, Twitter, YouTube. Even if they disagree with me or we have different points of opinion. The only time I've really done that is if I find them a very annoying individual, which has happened, but more often than not, I do it for the same reasons. That I try and keep my opinion. I will admit that I'm on the right wing of politics, although I've mentioned before that I'm going to try and stop identifying on a certain wing, or whether it be left or right. But at the very least, you have to have the two sides of the opinion. Otherwise, you're just going to get in your own bubble, and you'll never be able to get out of it. I was in that when I was younger. I only listened to when I found myself I considered myself more in the left wing of politics. Never looked up any conservative sources. Never looked up anything else aside for the one news source that I trusted. But these days, once I started actually, people always told me, you need to get out of your bubble. You need to listen to all forms of opinion. Once I started doing that, I started to grow intellectually. I started gaining so much more knowledge because of it, and I'm happy I've done it ever since.
And we're getting dumber. I don't know how much credence I put in that study. Studies, whatever. But there was a study that said 14 in Western world. Again, it's always the fucking Western world. 14-point loss in IQ. That's a full deviation. We go down one level more, we'll be borderline retarded mentally. That's pretty sad. In what was it, 20 years? And the school system is built that way. I mean, that Common Core math, I don't understand it. Takes 15 minutes to solve 2 + 5. No. The children, and then they give themselves their own report cards now, so they mark themselves, and I mean, they go into I was going out with a girl, and her daughter had some problems, and rather than addressing them, of course, which the school didn't have money for, they kind of, in a serious way, they kind of just put her off into, she wasn't dumb, she was very smart, she just had some problems. They put her off into she gets special tests and things. So I went to the school and I said, well, when does she get, when do you deal with this, and when does she get out of the special tests so she can go back into kind of full regular stream? The answer was she doesn't. She'll keep getting the special tests. And I'm like, really? So what kind of product are you putting out? She's a smart girl. She just needs a little bit of help. But rather than helping her, well, then we'll just dump 600 million offshore or whatever. Wash cash through Mr. Aga Khan, or, you know, that's just it. And, I come across very pessimistic. I'm not. If I was pessimistic, I wouldn't even be here. Like, there's just not a point. I have faith. I have faith in people just like you do, just like we all do. And in the right-left paradigm, yeah, I don't think like that. I think free mind and people who want to control and enslave, or who are already enslaved. Shut up, Ted. He's typing nasty things in the chat.
Oh, gotcha. Well, the other thing is too is I don't know if it's affected you where you live, but this is a national thing now, but at least over here in Ontario, children can no longer fail in school. That even if they fail a class, they're bumped on to the next grade. You couldn't do the math? Well, that's okay. You're going into grade 4 now, so don't even worry about it. I mean, where is the incentive there to even do well? Where's the incentive to strive, you know? I ended up failing math in grade 10. Had to go to summer school, and I hated summer school. At least I passed it, but at least the next couple of years that I was doing my math and everything, it gave me a reason to actually try when I didn't do very well, you know? And it's just, that is something that's completely gone. One thing that always surprised me at my jobs was the fact that time and time again, my bosses would tell me that I have a very good work ethic, which for a long time I saw that as sort of the, well, you're beautiful inside type argument, except for when you're working. It's like, well, you don't really do well anywhere else, but, you know, you got a good work ethic. But I've started to realize that it's actually a very lacking thing in people these days, that being told you have a good work ethic is actually a big compliment in this day and age. And I didn't realize that for a long time. But just nobody has the drive anymore. Everyone just wants to sort of stay where they are. I mean, the idea, like the amount of people that work in crappy jobs and their only goal in life is to move up the chain of command in those crappy jobs is absolutely astounding these days.
I don't know. That spooks me, because it just, whenever I think about the stuff, I start to think about, I don't know about other people, but I live in two different time frames. I live like 30 years ago probably, and now, and I bounce back and forth, and I just see the degradation of stuff. But when I was younger, my grandmother said to me, look around your classroom. Hardly any of those kids will ever own their own house. And that was back when houses were a reasonable price. And I was quite young at that point. And I said, you're out of your fucking mind. And once again, she knew, you know, she knew what the hell was going on. And it was just like, bam, because, yeah, so few people can afford to own their own houses because they work the shitty jobs, because that's all that's available to them, and they're never really going to get anywhere. So they're not going to get the self-satisfaction of well, they will get some, but they won't probably, because they'll be behind the 8 ball, fighting to stay alive. More and more debt. I mean, that's just simply the fact. How many, everybody, virtually, almost everybody is in debt. Virtually. You know.
Your grandma was a very smart lady, I'll tell you that much. She definitely saw she saw ahead of the curve without.
She liked rhubarb too. She's like, you got to plant rhubarb out at the farm. I'm like, nobody wants fucking rhubarb, Brad.
Only in pies. That's
yeah, it was like, you can't sell any of it. She's like, it'll be the crop of the future. Maybe it will be, you know, when we start eating pablum, which I guess we probably already are, but yeah. Anyway.
Oh, you wait, Soylent Green is
yeah, Soylent Green. Yeah. Well, we're making headway, and I think two important things that really show that. One, they're getting worried. They're really getting worried. They're desperate. And, you know, I see that they're winning the game, but they're desperate. And it's coming to me, you know, we're in a real, I can't find it historically. We're in a real time. And the other thing is, if, it's like the Voltaire quote, if, I forget exactly what the wording is, but if somebody is telling you you can't ask the questions, you're on the right path. The censorship of certain issues is the ones that we need to start going after, because that's what they don't want. And that's been there for a long time. But I'll leave it at that for tonight.
Sounds good. I mean, if I could just use a hockey metaphor, I would say it was 5-0 at the beginning, at the end of the first period. Beginning of the third, it's about 5-4 now. So we just need to keep playing the game a little bit harder, and we're going to catch up. And
well, awesome people like you. I really appreciate you coming and joining me tonight and sharing your wicked insight. Please, I would suggest everybody that's here or that watches this, subscribe to his channel. I left a link below, and his Twitter feed. Adrian's Twitter feed. So thank you ever so much for joining us. It was a bit of a long chat, but you know what? It went by really quickly, just because when people engage my mind, it just flies. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you for having me on. This has been great. I hope that we can collaborate.
Oh,
again
absolutely.
In the future.
Absolutely. I'm game anytime. Just let me know, and yeah, I'll get you back on here soon. I'm not the most organized person. That's my problem. So I'm going to try and be more. Who's an Islamophobe? Fuck you, meme. You're an Islamophobe. All right. So thanks very much. And yes, I will be in contact. Yeah, I should get a regular schedule set up of, you know, kind of good people, and you know, we can kind of do this every week or 2 weeks or something, or whatever fits.
I like that idea, and I am as long as I don't have work or something getting in the way, I am always up to come on your channel.
Awesome, and thanks everybody for joining us. And I think I may be on tomorrow night with Derek Rance, but I need to speak with him. I think he's in chat, but I will text you after this. But I didn't give a lot of notice, so I'm kind of hesitant to do another stream. But anyway, all right, take care, everybody. Have a great night.
Have a good one.